Chapter 282. The crowd couldn't figure out Mu Qinghe's thoughts, so they all quietened down. On the other hand, Chu Luiyue was very calm as if nothing had happened. She sat down and allowed all sorts of gazes to size her up. She could roughly guess that Mu Qinghe recalled the past, but she didn't know where his anger came from. After meeting him this time, she realized that Mu Qinghe's personality seemed to have changed a lot. Even though he was quiet in the past, he wasn't as unpredictable as he was now. Emperor Zhaoan came out to smooth things over. Haha, Vice Admiral Mu. You said yesterday that you came here to pick some people to cultivate with you. Is that true? Everyone's attention immediately shifted to Mu Qinghe. Countless pairs of eyes were filled with anticipation and excitement. Follow Mu Qinghe back? Isn't that going to the Tianling dynasty? This is a great opportunity. The Tianling dynasty is such a powerful existence. In the entire country Yaochun, only Emperor Zhaoan has the right to go there. The others don't even need to think about it. I didn't expect to have such a chance now. Mu Qinghe actually came here personally to pick people. That's right. Mu Qinghe's short 2 words immediately made the crowd's heart skip a beat. Even though Emperor Zhaoan already knew about this yesterday, he still felt very excited when it was brought up. There was an unconcealable glow of excitement in that pair of old eyes that were always calm and unperturbed. Almost all of country Yaochun's most outstanding talents are here. Take a look and see if there's anyone you like. Other than the princes and princesses, there were also important figures from the various aristocratic families, Tianlu Academy's elder son, and the rest. Of course, there were also Fu Yinshan and Cheng Han. Upon hearing Mu Qinghe's affirmative answer, the two of them looked at each other and saw the eagerness in each other's eyes. Mu Qinghe actually came here to pick people. He even wants to bring them back to the Tianling dynasty. I really don't know what kind of luck country Yaochun has. However, since we're here, we might as well join in. After all, there were many outstanding geniuses in the 2 academies. As long as one was chosen, their future was limitless. Mu Qinghe swept her gaze across the crowd. Those who were seen by him unconsciously straightened their shoulders and held their breaths. Vice Admiral Mu. Rong Jin suddenly stood up. I wonder if I can recommend myself? Out of habit, he wanted to say this consort. But he suddenly remembered that even Imperial Father didn't dare to call himself Zhen in front of Mu Qinghe. So he hurriedly changed his words. Emperor Zhaoan didn't expect Rong Jin to take the initiative, and was very surprised. But on second thought, Rong Jin was the most talented among all the princes, so he could give it a try. If even he couldn't do it, then there was no need to mention the others. After all, he was the crown prince. He should have the courage and insight. Mu Qinghe glanced at him. Rank 4 warrior? Such a powerhouse would be able to tell the level of other cultivators with just a glance. Rong Jin nodded nervously. In another month, I should be able to break through to rank 5 warrior. The crowd stared at him in shock. It wasn't easy to break through to rank 5 warrior, and many people were stuck at this stage their entire lives. But since Rong Jin dared to say this in front of everyone, he must be confident. Sensing the crowd's reaction, Rong Jin was delighted. Even though he lost to Heng Jingxue at the Qingjiao competition a few days ago, and was poisoned, it wasn't without benefits. After clearing the poison in his body, he shockingly realized that he seemed to have signs of breaking through. He had been cultivating diligently for the past 2 days, and he had vaguely touched that invisible barrier. Hence, he concluded that he could definitely break through in another month. This was actually a pleasant surprise. He originally wanted to wait until he really broke through, but he couldn't care less now. As long as he could get Mu Qinghe's praise then. There's no should or shouldn't when it comes to cultivation. As long as you don't break through, you're still a stage 4 warrior. Mu Qinghe's voice was cold as if she wasn't moved. Rong Jin was dazed. He looked up and saw the obvious indifference in Mu Qinghe's eyes. This was the attitude of a strong warrior towards an ant. Rong Jin was dazed. You should be over 20 years old this year, right? Rong Jin nodded hesitantly. Mu Qinghe snorted. Then, how can you stand here and say that you're volunteering yourself? What right do you have? Rong Jin didn't expect to be humiliated by Mu Qinghe in front of so many people. His face flushed red. Mu Qinghe's every word made him feel extremely embarrassed. He had been outstanding since he was young, and he had always been praised by others. This was the first time he was looked down upon. Emperor Jiawen looked awkward. Rongjun thought for a while, and suddenly smiled playfully. Lieutenant Mu, my brother is already the most outstanding. If you don't even like him, then no one here will be able to catch your eye. Her smile was bright, and her tone was light as if she was acting coquettishly. Mu Qinghe glanced at her. Rongjun's heart raced. She was nervous and expectant. Who are you? Mu Qinghe coldly spat out a few words. The smile on Rongjun's face froze. The palace was dead silent. Chu Luiyue looked down and played with the empty wine glass in his hand as his lips curved up. Mu Qinghe climbed up from the bottom, so she was very determined. After he became her right-hand man, countless girls wanted to throw themselves at him. Of all shapes and sizes, what had he not seen before? But before she died, he was 27 years old, and he still didn't have a wife or concubine. Rongjun really didn't deserve to be ranked. He didn't know where she got her confidence from to think that Mu Qinghe would fall for her tricks. Rongjun had never been humiliated like this in public, and her face was as pale as a sheet. Emperor Jiawen was already scolding Rongjun in his heart. How stupid! Can't she see that even I don't dare to speak up for Rongjin? She actually dares to speak up like this? She's really embarrassing the royal family. You don't have the right to speak. He harshly chided. Rongjun's eyes turned red and tears fell. The Empress gave a look to the person behind her to pull Rongjun back, before letting her sit down again. The atmosphere in the palace became even colder. Mu Qinghe asked, among you who has a Daijing Yuan meridian? Daijing Yuan meridian? The moment these few words came out, it made everyone's faces turn silly. How many years did it take for a genius to have a Daijing Yuan meridian to appear? It was fine if Mu Qinghe didn't say it, but she actually had such high standards once she opened her mouth. If she were to find someone based on this standard, none of the people here would be qualified. It seems like there aren't any. Chu Liyue's heart tingled, and he stood up. I am. Digression. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 283. The woman in front of him was beautiful, and had curved eyebrows and eyes. Her eyes were very similar to hers, but if one looked carefully, there were some differences. She used to be as high as the sun, high above the clouds and unparalleled in the world. Even if she just stood there, she could make people submit to her, and not dare to blaspheme her. However, the Chu Luiyue in front of him had more of a worldly aura. Although her eyes looked clear, if one looked carefully, one would find that there were too many things hidden in Chu Liyue's eyes. Curiosity, eagerness, flattery, and a trace of expectation. He had seen too many people looking at him like this. People who wanted to get something from him would always look at him like this. Probably because she was still young. Although her expression was very calm, her eyes couldn't lie. The subtle feeling in Mu Qinghe's heart gradually dissipated. The pair of eyes in his mind gradually became clear, and became two people. It's okay. He suddenly felt a little bored. Without saying anything more, he turned around and left. Hang Yao reluctantly looked at Chu Luiyue, and then followed Mu Qinghe. This time, it was very obedient and didn't look back. Vice Admiral Mu, take care. Chu Luiyue bowed respectfully. When Mu Qinghe's figure gradually disappeared in front of her, the eager smile on her face gradually disappeared. She pursed her lips into a straight line, looking a little cold. She had fooled him today, but she had to be more careful in the future. Fortunately, Hang Yao had always been very obedient. After sensing her thoughts, it really didn't pounce on her again. Chu Luiyue stood in place for a long time. It wasn't until her neck itched that she came to her senses. She looked down and saw Dumpling squatting on her shoulder, looking at her pitifully with a pair of round eyes. Chu Luiyue tapped its head. You feel wronged? You almost got me into big trouble today. Do you know that? Dumpling actually fought with Hang Yao in front of so many people. If Mu Qinghe pursued the matter, not to mention Dumpling, even she would have to bear the consequences. Dumpling rubbed her cheeks ingratiatingly. Hang Yao has a noble status, and is very powerful. Don't provoke it in the future. Chu Luiyue continued. However, When Dumpling heard this, she immediately stared at Chu Luyue with her eyes wide open, full of accusation. You're actually speaking up for that guy. Who exactly is your magical beast? Chu Luyue raised his eyebrows and looked at it. Today should be the first time you met the red demon, right? Why are you so hostile? It didn't provoke you. Dumpling shook her head frantically. He had provoked them. He had provoked them. That guy actually dared to throw himself into Chu Luyue's arms. How audacious. Plucking a tuft of hair was just a simple lesson to it. If there was a second time, let's see how I'll deal with it. Seeing Dumpling's high fighting spirit, Chu Luyue was silent for a moment and simply gave up trying to persuade it. Although Dumpling hadn't been with her for long, she had already figured out its character. Since it dared to openly attack Hong Yao in the main hall today, it would only fight more fiercely in private. It was useless to persuade it. Your temper is really like Hong Yao's, Chu Luyue muttered softly, but she didn't say the rest of the sentence. If it was in the past, she could at least mediate, but the situation was different now. Hong Yao's identity was extraordinary, and it could almost do whatever it wanted in country Yaochen. If Dumpling continued to target it, and even fought with it, people with ulterior motives would definitely not let her off easily. Chu Luyue's slender and fair fingers gently tapped Dumpling's nose. If you're not obedient, I won't bring you out next time. This sentence finally worked, and a hint of hesitation flashed across Dumpling's eyes. If I can't come out with Chu Luyue, what should I do if that fellow takes advantage of the situation? In the end, it could only nod its head unwillingly. Chu Luyue sighed softly. For some reason she had a feeling, when Hong Yao and Dumpling meet again, they will definitely fight again. Let's go. There's still a lot of trouble waiting for us in the future. Clatter. Inside the room, the sound of all sorts of things being smashed could be heard. It wasn't hard to imagine the anger of the owner. The palace servants all stood in the courtyard and looked inside from time to time, trembling in fear. Are you done? The Empress's authoritative voice sounded, and Rong Zhen, who was on the verge of losing control, finally found a trace of rationality. She glanced at the Empress, and her eyes were red as if she had suffered a great grievance. But this time, the Empress didn't console her like before. Instead, she was even angrier. You're still feeling wronged? Do you know what you've done today? That person is the envoy of the Tianling dynasty, and he has seen many tricks up his sleeves. Your thoughts have already been seen through by him. Who do you think you are? Rong Zhen looked at the Empress in disbelief. Ever since she was young, her mother had always doted on her. Even if she was willful and rash, her mother would always reprimand her. She had never been reprimanded by her mother like this before. Rong Zhen's face turned pale, and her body swayed as if she couldn't take such a blow. But the Empress didn't intend to stop. She took a few steps forward and stood in front of Rong Zhen, looking at her sternly. Do you know that if you weren't careful today, not only would you lose your life, but other people would also be implicated? Look at your brother. Isn't that the case? It's fine if you throw a tantrum in the past, but how dare you be so impudent today? Rong Zhen's body trembled and tears kept falling. Mother, what did I do wrong? I only said a few words. Aren't those few words enough? The Empress suddenly raised her voice, scaring Rong Zhen so much that she shivered, and fear and panic appeared in her eyes. Seeing her like this, how could the Empress's heart not ache? But today, she was determined to teach Rong Zhen proper manners. Otherwise, with her temperament, she would sooner or later bring harm to everyone. It's fine if something happens to you, but can you bear the responsibility if it harms your brother? Today, Rong Zhen had embarrassed himself in front of everyone, and the Empress was both heartbroken and afraid. On the one hand, she was worried that this would be a huge blow to Rong Zhen. On the other hand, she was worried that this would affect His Majesty's view of Rong Zhen. If what happened today were to spread, Rong Zhen's situation would become even more difficult in the future. Rong Zhen looked up in disbelief. Mother actually said that it was fine if something happened to me. Brother. Ever since I was young, I've done a lot for brother. She sneered. Mother, even if I'm in the wrong today, is brother really completely innocent? He's useless and can't compare to Chu Luyue. So Vice Admiral Mu didn't take a liking to him. He's useless. Pack. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 284. Chu Liyue's eyes curved into crescents as she heaved a sigh of relief. However, she wasn't happy at all. Instead, she was confused. Mu Qinghe seemed to care a lot about the Daijing Yuan Meridian. Did he come to country Yao Chun specifically to find a genius with the Daijing Yuan Meridian? However, in the Tianling dynasty, such people weren't common, but they weren't rare either. Why did he come all the way here to find them? Everyone looked at Chu Liyue in shock. It took them a while to come back to their senses. What did this mean? Chu Liyue really had the Daijing Yuan Meridian. Didn't that mean that she could follow Mu Qinghe to the Tianling dynasty? Mu Qinghe put away the stone. Chu Liyue asked tentatively, Vice Admiral Mu, since it's proven that I have the Daijing Yuan Meridian, then what you said before. Mu Qinghe was expressionless. You can indeed follow me back since you have the Daijing Yuan Meridian. Chu Liyue held her breath. She could clearly hear the sound of her heart beating fast. Don't be happy too early. Having the Daijing Yuan Meridian is just the beginning. There are other requirements. If you can't meet them, you won't be able to go. Mu Qinghe said calmly. Chu Liyue lowered her eyes. Thank you, Vice Admiral Mu. Liu will do his best. She knew that things weren't that simple. However, this was still an opportunity. It was even more in line with her thoughts. Although she wanted to go back as soon as possible and let those people experience the pain she had experienced, she knew very well that now wasn't the best time. With her current strength, she would just be courting death if she went back and fought them head-on. Mu Qinghe grunted. It was hard to tell whether he was happy or angry. Chu Liyue heaved a sigh of relief, but the others had mixed feelings. Everyone present had come with hope, but the requirements for the Daijing Yuan Meridian were too high, and they could not fulfill them. In the end, it was Chu Liyue who came out on top again. How could they be happy about this? Emperor Jiawen hesitated for a while, but he still carefully asked, Vice Admiral Mu, do you really only want people with the Daijing Yuan Meridian? Actually, there are some. Although they are not the Daijing Yuan Meridian, they are still very good. Why don't you pick some more? If they're all like him, then there's no need to say anything more. Mu Qinghe's gaze swept past Rongjin. Rongjin was even more embarrassed. As the crown prince, he had never experienced such a thing. Even when his father grounded him and took back many of his rights, he had never felt so humiliated. This was equivalent to giving him a few tight slaps in front of everyone. Emperor Jiawen didn't know how to reply at that moment. Not to mention Rongjin, even he didn't dare to show any displeasure when someone said that to him. Hearing Mu Qinghe's words, he couldn't continue and could only shut his mouth awkwardly. The entire palace's atmosphere became even stranger and colder. However, Chu Liyue was very calm as he calmly ate his food and ignored the surrounding gazes. Rongjin clenched her teeth and hated Chu Liyue for getting this rare opportunity one moment, and she was also annoyed at her previous rashness the next moment. After being reprimanded by Mu Qinghe, she originally felt very humiliated. However, when she saw that Mu Qinghe treated the others the same way, including Rongjin, she didn't feel so angry anymore. When she gradually calmed down, she also felt that her previous actions were a little overboard. Who is Mu Qinghe? He's the Tianling dynasty's envoy. He's the high and mighty lieutenant. Even father has to give in to him. So what if I'm reprimanded by him? Besides, I'm still counting on Mu Qinghe to help me heal my body. Thinking of this, she gave the Empress a look. The Empress saw the urgency in Rongjin's eyes and naturally knew what she meant. However, this made her even more frustrated. Does Rongjin think that I don't want to ask Mu Qinghe for help? Why doesn't she know? Look at the situation now. First it was the crown prince, then it was Rongjin. This pair of siblings was reprimanded in front of so many people, and she lost all her face. If they really made Mu Qinghe unhappy, he could casually kill them with one finger. How could she speak now? Seeing that the Empress didn't move, Rongjin couldn't help but feel anxious, and even wanted to get up a few times. Luckily, the palace servants standing behind her had already received the Empress's signal and silently held her back. Rongjin was very unhappy, but she didn't dare to really make a scene in this place, so she could only bear with it. At this point, something suddenly flew in from outside the door. Chu Liyue took a look and was suddenly stunned. It was a green sparrow. It was only the size of a palm, and its entire body was green. However, its claws and eyes were red, especially its pair of eyes. They were as bright as rubies and were very beautiful. This green sparrow flapped its wings and flew very quickly, but it didn't make any sound. Hence, when the people in the palace discovered it, it had already rushed to the center of the palace. "Stop it!" Rongjin frowned and hollered. "What are you doing? What kind of place is this? Can't even stop these random things." The guards outside rushed in one after another, but they couldn't say anything after hearing Rongjin's scolding. The flying speed of this thing was simply too fast. They couldn't stop it in time. "Your Highness, please calm down. We have important guests here today. This is my fiend." Mu Qinghe, who was sitting at the head of the table, suddenly spoke. Rongjin's remaining words were suddenly stuck in his throat, and his entire body froze. His limbs were cold. Mu Qinghe waved his hands, and the green sparrow flew toward him. Silence reigned in the hall. The green sparrow landed in Mu Qinghe's hands. Mu Qinghe glanced at it, and saw that there was a trace of blood under its wings. He knitted his brows slightly, and a cold light flashed across his eyes. "You're injured? Who hurt you?" The green sparrow moved its wings and covered the blood stains. Mu Qinghe knitted his brows even tighter. Hong Yao was a 7th grade fiend. It was very strong and rarely lost. Yesterday, it was a little anxious for some reason, so he let it out. He didn't expect it to be injured. Who else in country Yao Chun has such capabilities? Hong Yao bit the feathers on its wings, feeling wronged. Mu Qinghe said coldly, "Why didn't you say before? What did you promise before coming here? That you wouldn't cause any trouble. Are you obedient now?" Hong Yao didn't expect to be scolded even when it was injured, and it felt even more wronged. Its beautiful ruby-like eyes didn't blink, but they quickly filled with tears, making it look very pitiful. Mu Qinghe suddenly sighed in his heart. Hong Yao has really been spoiled by that person. It feels wrong just by saying a few words. "Hong Yao." Mu Qinghe's voice became stricter. Hong Yao suddenly turned around. Suddenly, it paused and looked at Chu Liyue in a daze. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. The next moment, he saw the small red sparrow flying toward him. Digression. Khan was so stuck that he wanted to die. His computer screen suddenly turned white again. The last chapter will be updated before midnight. I'm so unlucky today that I have nothing to say. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 285. News of what happened at the palace banquet quickly spread among the aristocratic families in the imperial capital. Chu Liyue also became the topic of discussion. First, she took first place twice in the Qing Jiao competition. Then, she was chosen to follow Mu Qinghe to the Tianling dynasty because of her Daijing Yuan meridian. In just a few days, Chu Liyue became famous. She became the envy of everyone. Ordinary people might not know, but the important figures in the aristocratic families all knew what the Tianling dynasty meant. From now on, Chu Liyue would have a meteoric rise and a bright future ahead of her. The palace banquet ended in the afternoon, but Chu Liyue had already received many gifts at night. She didn't need to look to know that those were people who wanted to get close to her, so she rejected all of them. After returning to the academy, she even chose to enter Juyo Tower to cultivate, regardless of the storm outside. At the Chu residence, Chu Xiao returned to the Chu residence with a gloomy face. The servants trembled in fear when they saw his expression and didn't dare to say anything. However, this situation was quickly changed. Since the afternoon, people kept asking to see him, and they were all asking for the same thing. What? Let Chu Ning and his daughter return to the Chu family? Hearing their suggestion, Chu Xiao exploded like gunpowder that had been ignited. That's impossible. Don't even think about it. Chu Ning and his daughter had already broken off all ties with the Chu family. Everyone in the imperial capital knew that they were at odds with each other. If they were to discuss this matter with them now, it would be equivalent to them admitting defeat. By then, the entire Chu family would become the laughingstock of the imperial capital. Chu Xiao felt uncomfortable every time he thought of that. He was determined not to agree. However, the members of the Chu family, who had always obeyed him, were also very determined this time. Great Elder, things are different now. The news that Chu Luyue was chosen to go to the Tianling dynasty has already spread among the aristocratic families. Even if she had a huge conflict with us in the past, we are still family. The same blood flows in our bodies. Why can't we let it go? That's right. She's no longer the useless trash that she used to be. Needless to say, her achievements in the future will definitely be great. This is also a great opportunity for the Chu family. Grand Elder, it's not as if we don't have your concerns. However, if we continue to fight with them, we'll only be at a disadvantage. After today, how many people in the imperial capital will want to get close to Chu Luyue? She's still from the family? As long as we take the initiative to ask for peace, she will definitely give us face. Listening to their hopeful words one after another, Chu Xiao was extremely irritated. He abruptly interrupted them and shouted angrily, "Let's go! Don't you know what kind of Chu Luyue? If you ask her for peace now, you're just asking for your own humiliation." Everyone looked at each other in dismay, feeling a little troubled. In fact, how could they not know this point? But wasn't there no other way? Could it be that he could only watch helplessly as such a great opportunity was missed? Compared to the Tianling dynasty, what was this little bit of face? As long as they could repair their relationship with Chu Luyue, they could have whatever they wanted in the future. Great Elder, we all know that you don't like Chu Luyue. However, shouldn't you think about the entire Chu family now? Third Elder suddenly spoke, his tone slightly cold. Chu Zhao's expression turned stern. What do you mean? The third elder smiled. Nothing. We all know why Chu Luyue left the Chu family. To be honest, it's because of you. It's not a big deal if you're safe. However, Chu Luyue is different now. We're in a favorable position. Wouldn't it be a pity if we give up just like that? The others nodded. Chu Ning and his daughter are not unreasonable people. As long as we sincerely apologize, I believe we can salvage the situation. Chu Xiao scolded angrily. You're crazy. Great Elder, we're not crazy. This is our only choice now. Third Elder was not frightened by Chu Zhao's anger at all, and his expression did not change. Our Chu family has been declining all these years, and our situation is not good. It wasn't easy to nurture Chu Xianmin, but she's basically useless now. Now that we finally have a top talent like Chu Luyue, we have no reason not to seize the opportunity, right? No matter what, she's someone that Vice Admiral Mu thinks highly of. What's wrong with us lowering our heads? When she becomes successful in the future, it'll be many times harder for us to do all this. The third elder's words immediately drew everyone's agreement. Everyone discussed fervently, implying that they hoped Chu Xiao would be the representative to apologize to Chu Ning and his daughter, and invite them back to the Chu family. Chu Xiao was annoyed. Say whatever you want. If you want to build a relationship with Chu Luyue, go ahead. In any case, this old man will definitely not go. Third elder smiled faintly. Great Elder, you're so stubborn. I wonder what the head of the family will think when he comes out and finds out about this. Chu Zhao's expression froze. He had almost forgotten about this. The head of the family had been in seclusion for too long, and he had already regarded himself as the head of the Chu family. Although third elder's words were unpleasant, they were not without reason. He could ignore the others, but not the head of the family. It would be hard for him to explain himself then. After hesitating for a long time, Chu Zhao's expression changed several times before he finally agreed. Give Chu Luyue. Forget it. Give Chu Ning an invitation, and say that we have something to discuss with him. Chu Luyue entered Juyo Tower again. As she had already broken through to stage 2, she easily ascended to the second floor this time. The Qingjiao competition had just ended, so not many students came to Juyo Tower. Chu Luyue simply walked around the second floor, and realized that there wasn't much of a difference here other than having a stronger force. She randomly found a room and started cultivating. Not long after she sat down, Chu Luyue heard a sharp and hoarse roar. That sound came closer and closer, and it gradually became clearer. The powerful suppression also became more and more terrifying. Chu Luyue even felt as if the blood in her body had solidified. Screech. That screech seemed to be right beside her ear. and it almost pierced her eardrums. Chu Luyue suddenly opened her eyes. But this time, she suddenly saw a pair of scarlet and sharp eyes in front of her. That pair of eyes was burning with raging flames. They covered the sky and covered the earth. Digression. I sincerely apologize to everyone. I had been running around outside today, and then I had to entertain my friends at night. I thought that I would come back to write after a simple meal, but I didn't expect that there would be so many delays, and I couldn't abandon my friends and come back alone. I feel very guilty. I'll update later. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 286. Hong Yao tilted its head to one side, making it clear that it didn't want to talk to Mu Qinghe. Mu Qinghe stared at Hong Yao. Your temper is getting worse and worse. Hong Yao glared at her with tears in its eyes. When she was here before, she never dared to treat it like this. Only a short time had passed, but its life was getting worse and worse. It had suffered enough in the past year. Mu Qinghe was such a stupid master. The more Hong Yao thought about it, the angrier it became. It couldn't wait to go back and find Chu Luyue, but it knew that Mu Qinghe would definitely not agree. Besides, that guy was still here. Its fur had been plucked off. Bang! Hong Yao was so angry that it simply lay straight on the ground. I won't go. I can't live like this. Mu Qinghe's eyes twitched. It's useless for you to throw a tantrum. Hong Yao didn't move. It was determined not to go with him. It might as well just let it die. Thinking of how it was injured by a beast that had been imprisoned for many years when it went out yesterday, Hong Yao felt ashamed. And today, it was treated like this by Mu Qinghe. It couldn't live like this. Mu Qinghe closed his eyes hard and tried to control his emotions, lest he accidentally killed his demonic beast. Who hurt you? If you are willing to tell me, I can help you take revenge. Hong Yao's eyes moved, but its body was still tense. It thought for a while and was in a dilemma. You can even get injured in such a place. It seems that you haven't been diligent in cultivation during this period of time. Mu Qinghe's following words successfully made Hong Yao give up the idea of asking him for help. A green flame ignited on its body, burning away the remaining bloodstains. Mu Qinghe raised his eyebrows and was a little surprised. Hong Yao had always liked to make trouble outside and then let him clean up the mess. He didn't expect it to be so courageous today. Since you don't want to tell me, I'll ask another question. Mu Qinghe's eyes were as sharp as a substance. He stared at Hong Yao, as if he wanted to see through it. Just now in the main hall, you, Vice Admiral Mu. Before Mu Qinghe could finish her sentence, she was suddenly interrupted by a clear female voice. He turned around and saw that it was Chu Luyue. What a coincidence. Mu Qinghe's expression changed and she glanced at Hong Yao. The red demon lying on the ground suddenly froze. It's over. He had been seen. This was too embarrassing. Without thinking, it flew up from the ground and rushed up. Then it circled around Mu Qinghe, not forgetting to dive down to the ground in the middle, pretending that it was also around Mu Qinghe. From afar, it looked like a jubilant butterfly. Mu Qinghe was speechless. Chu Luyue walked closer and asked in a surprised tone. Vice Admiral Mu, your magic beast looks really lively. Yes, he was still as good as ever. His ability to play dead and act shamelessly was still the same as before. Mu Qinghe was speechless. Hong Yao, who was flying excitedly, suddenly felt embarrassed. For a moment, it didn't know whether it should continue to fly. It staggered and almost fell from the air. In the end, it could only lower its head and accept its fate. What's the matter? Mu Qinghe coughed, but there was still no expression on her face. Chu Luyue smiled faintly. There is one thing I want to ask you for help with. I don't know if you are willing to agree. Say it. According to Mu Qinghe's character, she was never interested in this kind of thing. If it was before today, he would definitely not say a word when Chu Luyue talked to him like this. But thinking of Hong Yao's reaction to her, Mu Qinghe felt that maybe she should find an opportunity to get to know Chu Luyue more. Chu Luyue bowed. I have a friend whose mother has been ill for many years. Her condition has worsened recently. I wonder if Vice Admiral Mu can help. Luyue will definitely be very grateful. Mu Qinghe frowned. Your friend? Chu Luyue nodded. Mu Hongyu. She is country Yao Chen's Princess Yong'an. Mu Qinghe didn't care if Mu Hongyu was a princess or not. Even if it was Emperor Jiawen, he might not be willing to help. However, Hong Yao and you hit it off very well. For its sake, I can help you. Chu Luiyue looked surprised and looked at Hong Yao. Then, I really have to thank Hong Yao. Her red lips moved slightly as she softly called out its name. She was the one who named Hong Yao. Back then, when Mu Qinghe was hunting fiends, she coincidentally obtained Hong Yao. But she didn't know what to call it. Chu Luiyue thought that it was a green sparrow. And Mu Qinghe also had the word Qing in her name. Thus, they were considered to be fated. Hence, he purposely gave it the opposite name, Hong Yao. Now when he called out this name again, things had changed. Hong Yao was stunned, and instinctively wanted to fly toward Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue glanced at it. The human and fiend looked at each other. An undercurrent surged. Hong Yao suddenly paused. I don't seem to want to now. It stared at Chu Luiyue and couldn't wait to run over and complain to Mu Qinghe. Dumpling squatted on Chu Luiyue's shoulder and stared at it warily. Hong Yao felt a dull pain at the spot where the feathers were plucked off. After hesitating for a long time, it finally didn't go over and could only bury its head under its wings. No one saw the tears rolling down its cheeks, all of them falling into its feathers. After a while, its wings were wet. Seeing it like this, Chu Luiyue felt very sorry for it. Hong Yao had always been arrogant and often made a lot of trouble. But when it was really sad, it would only bury its head in its wings and cry, just like now. How could she not want to hug Hong Yao? Since her rebirth, everything she thought of in her previous life was like a dream. All the true feelings were fake, and all the loyalty was betrayal. In the end, Hong Yao was the only one who missed her. Seeing Hong Yao like this, she felt that the pain that went deep into her bones was a little comforted. But now was not a good time. Mu Qinghe said, I will stay here for a while. Let her come here. I will send a celestial physician to treat her. As the deputy general of the Black Cavalry, he had great power. It was not difficult for him to mobilize a few celestial physicians. Chu Luiyue looked away with a polite and eager smile on her face. Thank you, Vice Admiral Mu. After saying that, she asked hesitantly. But Vice Admiral Mu means that you won't leave immediately? Didn't he come here to pick people with the Daijing Yuan Meridian? Apart from that, was there something else? Mu Qinghe replied with a faint MHM, but didn't say anything else. Chu Luiyue knew that she wasn't qualified to ask so much now, so she didn't say anything and just curtsied. In that case, Luiyue won't waste your time. I'll take my leave first. After saying that, she took a step back and turned to leave. Stop. Mu Qinghe suddenly said. Chu Luiyue stopped in her tracks, turned around, and asked with a smile. Vice Admiral Mu, is there anything else? Digression. When I go out today, it will probably be very late. Don't wait during the day. Let's read it together at night. So how much do you owe now? Woo mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 287. Dumpling nodded vigorously. Chu Luiyue was speechless. This was already the 4th floor, and only stage 4 warriors could come up here. Looking around, it was empty. In the entire academy, there were less than 10 students who had reached stage 4. And there were no stage 5 warriors. Not a single one. Chu Ning was also a stage 5 warrior. Cultivators who could reach this level could be considered powerful in the entire country Yao Chen. It was obvious that there shouldn't be anyone above the 5th floor. Now it was hard to figure out how Tuanzi could pass through the barrier of the floor so easily. Chu Luiyue was most worried about something else. If they came up so quietly, would they alert Elder Wei Yin, who was guarding Juyo Tower? Juyo Tower was very important to Tianlu Academy. If they really caused a commotion and were discovered, it would be difficult for her to explain herself. Seeing that Chu Luiyue was standing there in deep thought, and didn't seem to have any intention of following her, Dumpling couldn't wait any longer and turned around, heading straight for the 5th floor. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly as she watched Dumpling fly to the barrier on the 5th floor. Although there was still a distance between them, Chu Luiyue could clearly feel the suppression above. It was much stronger than the one on the 4th floor. Perhaps the suppression on the 5th floor could stop Dumpling? If Juyo Tower was really so easy to get into, it wouldn't make sense, right? Thinking of this, Chu Luyue calmed down a little as she stood on the spot and watched quietly. However, her fantasy was shattered very quickly. That strong barrier didn't stop Dumpling at all. It passed through it easily, as if it was entering an uninhabited land. Seeing Dumpling happily wagging her tail at her, Chu Luyue was silent for a while. She seemed to have underestimated this blood ferret that she had casually picked up. After hesitating for a long time, Chu Luyue took a deep breath and finally decided to follow Dumpling up. Since they had already come this far, she wanted to see what it was that had attracted Dumpling. In fact, there was another thing she wanted to clarify. When she first came to Juyo Tower and pushed the door open, the ferocious beasts carved on the door seemed to have come alive. Ever since she started cultivating here, she had heard that strange sound more than once. Although Chu Luyue didn't know what kind of magical beast was imprisoned under Juyo Tower, she was certain that the magical beast was targeting her. Thinking of this, she made up her mind and stretched out her hand in front of the barrier. Dumpling immediately hugged her hand happily and easily crossed the barrier with her. Looking at the lively Dumpling and his unharmed body, Chu Luyue pursed his lips and looked up. The staircase spiraled up to the top. However, each layer of barriers was like layers of fog, concealing everything and making it impossible to see anything clearly. A question suddenly flashed across Chu Luyue's mind. Since only stage 5 warriors could go up to the 5th level, did the top few levels have the same rules? For example, only stage 7 warriors could go up to the 7th level? However, there were no cultivators outside Heaven's canopy who could break through to this level. If that was the case, then what was the point of the top few levels of Juyo Tower? One had to know that in the entire country Yaochun, the strongest was only a stage 5 warrior. There wasn't even a stage 6 warrior. In other words, with Juyo Tower here, everyone could only go up to the 5th level at most. Who placed such a powerful Juyo Tower here? Chu Luyue recalled that Bai Chun had specially introduced Juyo Tower when she was in the academy. However, at that time, he only mentioned that the pit of heavenly origins was under Juyo Tower, so the density of force in the tower was much better than the outside world. However, he didn't say anything else. A large part of the reason why Chu Luyue wanted to enter Tianlu Academy was because of Juyo Tower. However, she now felt that there were too many secrets buried in Juyo Tower. She looked at Dumpling. Shall we continue? When Chu Luyue entered Juyo Tower and broke through the 5th barrier, Rong Xiu had just returned to Yifeng Courtyard from Prince Li's mansion. Yan Qing followed closely behind and quickly reported the day's events to Rong Xiu. Rong Xiu lay down on the rattan chair. His expression was calm, and no one could tell if he was happy or angry. Has the time been set? Yan Qing bowed. Not yet. From what Vice Admiral Mu said, it seems like he will be staying here for a while. He also seems to be planning to test Miss Lu Yu again. He will only bring Miss Lu Yu to the Tianling dynasty after she passes all of them. Rong Xiu's lips curled into a faint smile. Of course, he won't go back immediately. Mu Qinghe came here because she had other important matters to attend to. You said that she was the one who mentioned that she had a Daijing Yuan meridian? Rong Xiu asked calmly. Yan Qing bowed and replied respectfully, yes. Yes. Rong Xiu remained silent for a while. He crossed his fingers, and his eyes darkened slightly. It seems like she really wants to go. Yan Qing sensed that something was wrong with her master's aura. She hesitated for a while and said, to the people of country Yaochun, it's a great opportunity to go to the Tianling dynasty. It's reasonable for Miss Lu Yu to want to go. Besides, Miss Lu Yu is very talented. It's a pity for her to stay here. Rong Xiu closed his eyes gently. Of course, he knew this. However, he was more concerned about something else. Suddenly, he opened his eyes and looked in the direction of Juyo Tower. Yan Qing was shocked. Master, what's wrong? Rong Xiu frowned slightly. Someone barged into the 6th floor of Juyo Tower. Yan Qing was shocked. Wasn't the 6th floor of Juyo Tower only accessible to stage 6 warriors? No one in the entire imperial city could do it, let alone Tianlu Academy, right? Master, could it be those Rong Xiu raised his hand and narrowed his eyes before Yin Qing could finish her sentence. No. He found that aura very familiar. It's her. His expression changed slightly, and he immediately rushed toward Jiuyou Tower. Why did she enter Jiuyou Tower at this time? On the other side, Chu Luiyue looked back, and still couldn't believe that she had reached the 6th floor just like that. With Dumpling leading the way, she didn't encounter any obstacles. If she hadn't experienced it herself, Chu Luiyue wouldn't have believed that she could reach the top few floors of Jiuyou Tower in such a way. She looked around, and saw that there was no one around. The space here was much smaller than the 1st floor, but the force was more concentrated. If she cultivated here, she would definitely get twice the result with half the effort. However, at the same time, the rich force was mixed with all kinds of impurities, which made people flinch. However, she still couldn't find any trace of the fiend here. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and looked up. Could it be even higher up? Digression. I'll update slowly in the afternoon after eating. Love mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 288. Chu Luiyue looked at Dumpling. Dumpling, are you going to stop? This is already the 6th floor. It was obvious that only stage 7 warriors could go further up. Dumpling blinked and looked up again, seemingly puzzled by Chu Luiyue's question. There was nothing here, so of course they had to continue going up. Chu Luiyue held her breath for a moment and finally said, Okay, if you can go up, I'll go with you. Tuanzi wagged its tail happily and turned around, intending to go to the 7th floor. Chu Luiyue looked down and saw that there seemed to be no end to the spiral staircase. Suddenly, her gaze froze, and she looked at her feet. There was actually a drop of dried blood there. As it was dark red and fell at the edge, she didn't see it when she came up from below. This was the 6th level. Who would be able to come here and leave behind a trail of blood? She bent down and took a closer look, frowning slightly. According to her experience, this drop of blood seemed to have been left not long ago. It was very likely that it was left in the past 2 days. Who could it be? Chu Luiyue stretched out her hand, wiped the blood gently, and looked at it carefully. A familiar aura hit her in the face. She was stunned. This seemed to be. She immediately looked around the drop of blood again. After searching carefully, she finally saw a green feather in an inconspicuous corner. She immediately recognized that it was Hong Yao's feather, with just one look. Hong Yao has been here. Chu Luiyue was shocked, and then she suddenly remembered that when she saw Hong Yao previously, there was blood under its wings. It seemed to be injured. At that time, she was immersed in the shock that Hong Yao actually recognized her, so she didn't pay attention to it. Now that she thought about it, it was indeed strange. As a 7th grade fiend, Hong Yao was very powerful. Being able to injure it showed that the other party wasn't easy to deal with. More importantly, there shouldn't be such an existence in country Yao Chun. From the looks of it, Hong Yao had barged into Jiuyou Tower and was injured here. Chu Luiyue couldn't help but think of that ferocious magical beast. Seeing that Chu Luiyue didn't follow her, Dumpling chased after her. When it saw the green feather in Chu Luiyue's hand, a look of disdain flashed across its eyes. As expected, he was useless. He was actually injured here. Chu Luiyue glanced at it. Dumpling, Hong Yao is injured here. Are you sure you want to continue? Even Hong Yao had suffered a loss, so she and Dumpling might not be a match for him. Hearing this, Dumpling's face immediately scrunched up. How could that green sparrow compare to it? Chu Luiyue saw that it was very stubborn, so she couldn't help but sigh. If you run into trouble later, I can't help you. It might even become a burden to her. Dumpling stepped forward angrily and threw away the green feather. Then, it hugged Chu Luiyue's hand and walked up. She had made up her mind. Chu Luiyue had no choice but to secretly take out the crystal barrier, ready to deal with any sudden situations. The human and beast continued to walk toward the 7th floor. Chu Luiyue already felt as if something heavy was pressing down on her body, and every step she took was extremely heavy. If not for Dumpling, she probably wouldn't have been able to continue. Finally, the two of them reached the barrier on the 7th floor. Unlike the transparent barriers from before, the one in front of him was actually a bright silver. The brilliance flowed, and it looked as brilliant as the galaxy. However, Chu Liyue was not in the mood to admire it at this moment. She stood stiffly in front of the barrier, and the blood in her body seemed to have solidified. Only her heart was beating wildly. She took a deep breath, and then slowly stretched out her hand and reached forward. Dumpling sat on the back of her hand, and its round eyes were wide open, looking excitedly and expectantly at the flickering silver barrier in front of it. Chu Liyue could clearly see her fingers slowly sinking into the silver barrier. The silver barrier was solid, and Chu Liyue could even clearly feel the strong resistance. This time, it was as if she had plunged into a quagmire. Soon, Chu Liyue felt as if there was a force crazily dragging her, trying to pull her in. Her heart trembled, and she subconsciously tried to pull her hand out. However, the force also grew rapidly, and it swallowed even more of her hand. Very quickly, the flowing light had already pulled her entire hand into it. Dumpling's body was halfway in. At this moment, a ball of black karmic fire suddenly rushed out of the barrier. A burning pain suddenly assaulted him. Chu Liyue immediately wanted to retreat. But at this moment, she was already trapped within the silver barrier. She could not move. In an instant, the black karmic fire had spread to Chu Liyue's body and surrounded her. Chu Liyue immediately threw out the crystal barrier. However, she soon realized that the crystal barrier did not have any effect. Because one of her hands had sunk into the silver barrier, the crystal barrier could not pass through the barrier and could not completely protect her. Helpless, she could only put away the crystal barrier and began to think of other ways. The blazing flames made her feel as if her entire body was burning. She could even smell something burning. However, at this moment, Dumpling's body had been completely swallowed by the flowing light. Chu Liyue realized that her hand, which had been swallowed by the barrier, was completely numb and had lost all feeling. Therefore, at this moment, she had lost all sense of Dumpling. Dumpling! Chu Liyue raised her voice and shouted. However, Dumpling did not respond. At this moment, the black karmic fire had completely spread over the entire barrier. Chu Liyue stood there, as if she was in hell. Just as she was feeling extremely anxious, she suddenly heard a clear sound. Kacha! Her heart jumped, and she immediately focused her gaze. She saw that the black karmic fire in front of her had suddenly encountered something terrifying, and was rapidly retreating from the center. A crack had appeared on the barrier that was flickering with light. Chu Liyue's brows furrowed, and in the next moment, she saw that the crack had expanded again. Crash! The barrier shattered. A small claw suddenly reached out from within. It was Dumpling. Chu Liyue's heart relaxed. Then, she saw Dumpling grab the edge of the shattered barrier and forcefully break it. Kacha! A bright and colorful barrier was actually broken like a piece of broken ice by it. Chu Liyue suddenly had a premonition. Indeed, in the next moment, she heard the crisp sound of something being bitten. Kacha! Kacha kacha! Gulp! Through the hole in the middle, Chu Liyue could clearly see Dumpling stuffing the last bit of the barrier into her mouth, chewing and swallowing. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 289. This scene was all too familiar. However, Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat uncontrollably when she saw it. How could Dumpling eat this? Previously, when it ate Hung Jingchua's force, she thought it was already shocking enough. She did not expect it to be able to eat a barrier that was full of pressure so easily. This was not an osmanthus cake. Because she was too shocked, Chu Liyue could not say a word for a while. She could only watch in a daze as Dumpling broke off another piece and put it into its mouth. Chu Liyue even saw that there was still a black karmic fire on the barrier that had yet to burn. However, Dumpling did not seem to care at all. Because it was careless, a strand of its beard was burned off. Fortunately, it changed its angle in time, and successfully put the thing into its mouth, and ate it happily. The black karmic fire around it was still burning wildly, but Chu Liyue suddenly felt that this thing did not seem to be so powerful. No matter how strong it was, wasn't it still eaten by Dumpling? Looking at Dumpling diligently breaking off another piece, the corner of her eyes twitched. If other people saw this scene, they would be so shocked that their jaws would drop. Dumpling, is it delicious? In the end, she could not help but ask. Dumpling heard her and stopped. It looked at her with bright eyes and nodded furiously. Delicious. Super delicious. It was much better than Hung Jingchua's moon devourer. Compared to this, what it ate before was rubbish. Chu Luyue was shocked by its enthusiastic reaction, and the corner of her eyes twitched uncontrollably. So what exactly did she bring back? After the previous few incidents, Chu Luyue had already guessed that Dumpling was not an ordinary blood ferret. It was even different from other magical beasts. She had never heard of any magical beast that consumed origin power as food. She did not notice it before, but later she realized that Dumpling did not seem to like to eat. What it loved the most was origin power, and it was the kind that came in large clumps, just like this silver barrier. This thing was also condensed from origin power, and contained an extremely powerful suppressive might. Chu Luyue had no doubt that this barrier could indeed stop cultivators below rank 7. Therefore, Dumpling's behavior now looked even more strange. As Dumpling ate crazily, the hole in the barrier grew bigger and bigger. The black karmic fire that was spreading wantonly seemed to have sensed that something was wrong and retreated. However, Dumpling was even faster. She devoured the flaming barrier piece by piece. Chu Luyue watched quietly, the waves in his heart unable to calm down for a long time. That originally extremely tall silver barrier was quickly reduced to rubble. In the end, it was completely destroyed by Dumpling. As for the hand that had been swallowed, it had been freed at some point. After finishing the last bite, Dumpling finally rubbed her round belly and burped in satisfaction. Burp! Chu Luyue was speechless. If Hung Jingchua could see this scene, he should be able to rest in peace. In this world, how many people's origin power could receive the same treatment as this powerful barrier? From the looks of it, Dumpling was willing to swallow that ball of origin power, because she was compromising. Chu Luyue looked at the broken barrier in front of him, and did not recover for a long time. After a while, he looked at Dumpling faintly. Dumpling, tell me honestly, did you come here just to eat this? Dumpling suddenly sneezed. Achoo! Chu Luyue was speechless. She seemed to be guilty. Chu Luyue held his forehead helplessly. The 7th level's barrier was eaten by Dumpling just like that. This matter would definitely attract the attention of the elders in the academy. It might not even take long for them to rush over. Of course, whether or not they could reach this level was another matter. But if others found out, she felt that she really could not explain it. Did she have to tell everyone that she was brought up by Dumpling, and that it was also the one who ate this barrier? Dumpling saw that Chu Luyue seemed to be very troubled, so it quickly flew over, and threw itself into her arms, rubbing against her ingratiatingly. Chu Luyue's neck tickled, and she could not help but laugh. She pulled Dumpling down, annoyed and amused. Don't act cute. Tell me, what should we do now? How was she going to explain such a big hole? Dumpling blinked and thought for a long time. Then it stretched out its paw and pointed upwards. Chu Luyue's eyebrows twitched violently, and an even more ominous premonition attacked her heart. You still want to go up? Dumpling heard a hint of threat in her voice, and nodded timidly. How far were they? If they did not go up, wouldn't they have made this trip in vain? Chu Luyue's hands trembled slightly, and she kept chanting in her heart. This is my fiend. If I kill it, it will be gone. This is my fiend. If I kill it, it will be gone. This is my fiend. But I don't want to die. Chu Luyue finally could not hold it in anymore, and pinched its chubby cheeks harshly. Dumpling, do you know that your master only has one life? If it's gone just like that, it will really be gone. Tuanzi blinked its eyes, and then clasped its paws together. It bowed obediently with its hands folded in front, looking eager to please. Chu Luyue closed her eyes. Go! When the 7th level's barrier was eaten by Tuanzi, Elder Wei Yun, who was dozing off in his chair outside Juyo Tower, suddenly opened his eyes. He looked up at Juyo Tower in shock. This commotion was not right. He had been guarding Juyo Tower for many years, but he had never felt such a commotion. For the past half a year, Juyo Tower had some strange movements from time to time, but it had always been within their control. Thus, even the dean did not take it to heart. But now boom! The door of Juyo Tower suddenly opened. Several figures were thrown out one after another by a powerful force. They were the students who were cultivating in Juyo Tower. Cries of surprise were incessant. Clearly, these people had not realized what had happened. Some of them could not withstand the impact of this force, and even vomited blood. They were extremely pathetic. Elder Wei Yun's heart was in his mouth. For so many years, such a situation had never happened in Juyo Tower. He abruptly stood up and slapped the black jade stone in front of him without any hesitation. A bright light pillar shot up to the sky. Juyo Tower has changed. Other than teachers and elders, all students retreat. Elder Wei Yun shouted sternly. His voice spread far and wide. When the students who were chased out of Juyo Tower heard this, they were all shocked and hurriedly retreated. At the same time, everyone else in the college also saw the light pillar. Level 1 alert. What happened in Juyo Tower? Digression. I'm going out tonight. I don't know when the 5th watch will be updated. Everyone don't wait. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from love. Chapter 290. Rong Xiao, who was walking toward Juyo Tower, frowned when he saw the light pillar. He was still a step too late. She had already reached the 7th floor. He quickened his pace and walked forward. Yanqing followed behind. She was also shocked when she saw the commotion, and didn't dare to say a word. Miss Lu Yu is too daring. She actually caused such a huge commotion in Juyo Tower. The two of them walked forward, and soon met the students who were retreating. Princely, the girls were shocked when they saw Rong Xiao. Rong Xiao was expressionless as he lightly nodded, and continued walking forward. Princely, it's dangerous ahead. The girls looked at each other, and hurriedly rushed in front of Rong Xiao, wanting to stop him. Rong Xiao quietly looked at the few of them. His expression was calm to the extreme. But those women felt a chill run up from the soles of their feet, rushing straight to their heads. Their joy and excitement from meeting Rong Xiao quickly faded. They looked at each other, and their faces turned pale. This Princely's aura is not ordinary, Yanqing immediately said. Princely has something important to do. His Highness has important matters to attend to, so please do not delay. The girls came back to their senses and hurriedly stepped aside. Rong Xiao walked forward, and didn't even look at her. The girls hesitated for a while and couldn't help but shout. Princely, Juyo Tower has changed. It's the most dangerous time for you to go there now. Elder Wei Yin has already ordered everyone to evacuate. It's better if you don't go. Rong Xiao was unmoved and continued walking forward. Yanqing felt helpless. Can't these people tell that Master has made up his mind to go? If they obstruct him and delay his matters, it would be dangerous for them. Yanqing turned around and scanned the girls. Princely knows what he's doing. The women's faces turned even paler, and they didn't dare to say anything more. Gradually, more and more students began to evacuate. Everyone was moving away from Juyo Tower, and only Rong Xiao went against the flow. Many people were surprised to see him. Why did the frail Princely come here at this time? And it looks a little different from before. Some people couldn't help but remind her, but Yanqing blocked them all. Rong Xiao finally arrived in front of Juyo Tower. Elder Wei Yin was anxiously looking at Juyo Tower when he unintentionally turned his head and saw Rong Xiao walking over. His brows were tightly knitted together. Rong Xiao, why are you here at this time? Now that all the students had been evacuated, the elders and teachers would come to deal with it. You should leave as soon as possible. There are still people inside. Rong Xiao interrupted him. Elder Wei Yin was stunned. Just as he was about to ask who it was, his heart suddenly lit up. Yes, and Chu Luyue. He had actually almost forgotten about her. He remembered that when she came in the afternoon, he even congratulated her. Thinking back, Chu Luyue wasn't among the students who came out just now. She was still inside. How did this happen? Juyo Tower changed, and all the students were expelled. Why is Chu Luyue the only one left? Elder Wei Yin also became nervous. Chu Luyue had taken first place twice in the Qing Jiao competition just now. She was undoubtedly the top genius in their academy. If anything happened to her, They wouldn't be able to bear the loss. Rongxiu looked up at Juyo Tower. I'll go in and bring her out. Elder Wei Yun gritted his teeth and immediately rushed in. But at this moment, Juyo Tower's door slammed shut with a bang. It blocked Elder Wei Yun outside. Elder Wei Yun widened his eyes. Isn't Chu Luyue completely trapped in Juyo Tower? He tried to open the door, but it didn't budge at all. Elder Wei Yun then realized that the situation was more serious than he had imagined. What's going on? Just as he was feeling extremely anxious, Sun Zhongyan and the rest finally arrived. Elder Wei Yun quickly explained the situation to them. There were no signs when Juyo Tower changed. I don't know what's going on. The door can't be opened now. Sun Zhongyan frowned and asked. Is there anyone inside? Elder Wei Yun swallowed his saliva with difficulty. Chu Luyue is still inside. What? Sun Zhongyan was shocked and immediately looked at Juyo Tower with a frown. Then he crossed his arms in front of him. Rays of light intertwined, and a Xian formation quickly appeared. At the same time, spots of starlight appeared around Juyo Tower. That was the Xian formation set up on Juyo Tower. Sun Zhongyan looked at the Xian formation in front of him carefully. That's not right. There's no trace of her in Juyo Tower. This Xian formation was connected to Juyo Tower. Even if they couldn't enter, they could see something from the Xian formation. Sun Zhongyan looked at it for a while, but he couldn't sense Chu Luyue's presence. Elder Wei Yun was puzzled. Impossible. She went in the afternoon, and all the other students came out together. She was the only one who didn't come out. She should still be inside. Sun Zhongyan held his breath and checked the Xian formation again. He still shook his head. Still nothing. Everyone looked at each other and fell silent. This situation was too strange. Elder Wei Yun anxiously paced around in circles. Why can't we find her? She's clearly inside. Rongxiu suddenly said. Elder Sun, which level can your Xian formation see? Sun Zhongyan was stunned and instinctively replied. 5 levels. This Xian formation has been with Juyo Tower for many years, and it has always been able to see 5 levels. You mean? A ridiculous thought flashed across Sun Zhongyan's mind. Could it be that Chu Luyue isn't on the 5 levels below? That's impossible, Sun Zhongyan blurted out. No one in Tianlu Academy has ever been able to go above the 5th level. How could she? Halfway through his words, his voice abruptly stopped. Other than this explanation, he couldn't find any other answers. Also, Juyo Tower's sudden change seemed very wrong. Everyone fell into dead silence. Suddenly, a scream came from the crowd. Look! That door! Everyone looked over, and they were all shocked. They saw that the engraved lines on Juyo Tower's door suddenly jumped. In the blink of an eye, it turned into black karmic fire. It burned fiercely. How could this be? Sun Zhongyan opened his eyes wide and muttered in disbelief. While everyone was still in shock, the fire had already spread rapidly. In an instant, the entire first level of Juyo Tower was surrounded by the black karmic fire. Roar! An extremely ferocious roar suddenly sounded from Juyo Tower. It reverberated through the heavens. Digression. I rushed it out with all my might. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 291. Everyone was horrified. What is that? Why were there cries of fiends coming from Juyo Tower? Only Sun Zhongyan was frowning, and his wrinkled face was scrunched up. All Xian masters, listen up. Activate the locking heaven formation. Everyone else, evacuate immediately. Once those words were spoken, everyone looked at Sun Zhongyan in shock. The locking heaven formation was the sealing formation of Juyo Tower, and it had never been activated for thousands of years. Now, no one knew what would happen after the locking heaven formation was activated. Elder Sun, can't the locking heaven formation only be activated by the president? Bai Chen asked hurriedly. Sun Zhongyan's face was solemn. I've already informed Uncle Master. I hope he can come out of seclusion as soon as possible. But Juyo Tower has changed, and the situation is critical. We can't delay. We have to activate the locking heaven formation immediately. Uncle Master has already entrusted the locking heaven formation to me, so I can activate it too. As he spoke, he flipped his wrist, and a silver needle appeared in his palm. At first glance, the silver needle looked no different from an ordinary silver needle, but if one looked closer, they would see exquisite patterns engraved on it. In fact, the patterns on it were exactly the same as the patterns on Juyo Tower's door. Hearing Sun Zhongyin's words, everyone knew that this was the only way now. No one knew when the president would come, but Juyo Tower's situation couldn't wait any longer. Seeing the silver needle in Sun Zhongyin's hand, everyone felt more at ease. Elder Sun, please give us your orders. Sun Zhongyin rose into the air. He threw the silver needle in his hand. The silver needle grew in the wind and rapidly expanded to the size of a person's arm. From afar, it looked like a silver pestle. Then, the silver pestle landed right above Juyo Tower. It spun rapidly, locking heaven formation activate. Sun Zhongyin shouted, and countless silver lights flew out of his hand. They all poured into the silver pestle. The next moment, a buzzing sound was heard. The patterns on the silver pestle suddenly lit up. Swoosh! A silver dot of light flew out and landed in a certain location. Sun Zhongyin said, Bai Chun. She san. Without saying a word, Bai Chun immediately flew over and stood on top of the star. Swoosh! A second silver light quickly appeared and flew to the other side. Wenyan, Nanqi, Chunshao, Donglu, Qigao, Beisi. Sun Zhongyin quickly gave the order, and all the Xian masters moved out. A huge Xian formation quickly appeared in the sky above Juyo Tower. Countless silver lines flew out from the silver pestle and intertwined with each other. Starlight flickered on them and spread out like stars on a chessboard. All the mystic cultivators also spread out and prepared to attack. The heaven ceiling formation was a level 6 Xian formation, and no Xian master in the academy could activate it alone. Therefore, they could only work together. When everyone was in position, Sun Zhongyin shouted in a deep voice, Activate! As soon as he said that, all the Xian cultivators moved at the same time and poured their origin power into the starlight beneath their feet. Streams of light flew out and flowed along the huge interweaving lines in the air. They were all gathered in the silver pestle. Wang! A vast pressure descended. Above Juyo Tower, the locking sky formation was activated. Below Juyo Tower, the other teachers had already begun to evacuate. At a time like this, the only thing they could do was to ensure the safety of everyone in the academy. Rongxiu, let's go. Elder Wei Yun saw that Rongxiu was still standing at the same spot, and thought that he hadn't reacted yet, so he hurriedly advised him. It's very dangerous here. You can't stay here. Given Juyo Tower's current situation, no one could say for sure what would happen. The heaven ceiling formation had already been activated, and the pressure was extremely strong. When the two forces collided, the people standing at the side would bear the brunt of it. Rongxiu didn't have much cultivation, and his body was weak. How could he withstand such a crushing force? If anything happened to Rongxiu, they wouldn't be able to explain it to His Majesty. However, Rongxiu didn't seem to hear anything, and only looked up at the 7th level of Juyo Tower. Rongxiu! Elder Wei Yun shouted again, but Rongxiu still didn't respond. He couldn't help but become more anxious. When he turned back, the black karmic fire had already completely surrounded the 1st level of Juyo Tower, and the door was completely sealed. What was even more worrying was that it didn't have any intention of stopping, and was spreading toward the 2nd level. The scorching flames had already started to ignite the surroundings. The air was so hot that it could almost burn people. Elder Wei Yin was burning with anxiety. He had to control this fire as soon as possible. Otherwise, once it spread, the consequences would be unimaginable. Yin Qing, take him away quickly. Elder Wei Yin had no choice but to shout at Yin Qing. Yin Qing looked up, glanced at Elder Wei Yin, and shook his head firmly. Elder Wei Yin, please forgive me. Yin Qing has always been obedient to His Highness. Since His Highness wanted to stay here, he naturally had to follow. Even if he knew that it was very dangerous, he had no other choice. Because that person was in even more danger now. If anything happened to Chu Luyue, Yin Qing didn't dare to imagine what his master would do. Elder Wei Yun couldn't help but curse in his heart when he saw that the master and servant didn't listen to him at all. These two fools. Everyone else had already left. Were they really going to stay here and wait for death? Boom! A ball of black karmic fire suddenly rose. It actually shot straight up to the 3rd level. Elder Wei Yin wasn't paying attention and was hit by the blast. He lost his balance and took a few steps back. Screech! The fiend's screech sounded again. Everyone's mind was shaken. The entire school seemed to be enveloped in this fierce and shrill screech. Elder Wei Yun's blood was in turmoil, and he almost spat out blood. He looked up at Jiyo Tower in shock. What kind of fiend was suppressed in there? It was actually so powerful. It was just a screech, but it actually had such a frightening aura. At the same time, even the students and teachers who had retreated far away were somewhat affected. They widened their eyes in shock as they looked at Jiyo Tower. Their hearts were in turmoil. Gosh, Jiyo Tower is actually burning. What exactly is going on? Old Sun and the rest actually activated the locking heaven formation? This is the first time in 1,000 years, right? Weren't the few of you still cultivating in Jiyo Tower previously? Do you know what exactly is going on? How would we know? Everything was fine before. Suddenly, there was a huge force that chased us out. We didn't even have time to react. Luckily you all came out. If you were still inside, I'm afraid. Wait! I just heard from Elder Wei Yin that Chu Luiyue seems to still be inside. What? Then isn't she? Everyone looked at each other and fell silent. Chu Luiyue is most likely doomed this time. On the other side, Elder Wei Yin finally caught his breath. Suddenly, he saw a tall figure striding toward Jiyo Tower. He was shocked. Rongxiu, stop right there. However, Rongxiu didn't stop and continued forward without hesitation. In an instant, the black karmic fire enveloped him and swallowed him. Digression, I'm staying at my friend's house. She's still sleeping, and I'm sitting on the bay window quietly typing. I think it's better to read it at night. Updates will drop from time to time. I'm in debt again and again. Too much debt is no burden. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 292. Rongxiu is really crazy. This thought flashed across Elder Wei Yun's mind. Jiyo Tower is so dangerous now. Not only did Rongxiu not leave, but he even barged in. Isn't he courting death? He gritted his teeth and rushed forward, wanting to bring Rongxiu out. But a ball of black karmic fire suddenly exploded in front of him. It blocked Elder Wei Yin outside. He hurriedly turned around and saw that Yin Qing didn't follow Rongxiu in. He was about to call out to Yin Qing when Yin Qing suddenly turned around and left. She disappeared in the blink of an eye. This is Elder Wei Yin couldn't care less now. He had no choice but to fly into the air and say to Sun Zhongyan, Rongxiu has gone into Jiyo Tower. Sun Zhongyan frowned. I know. This locking heaven formation was specially used to suppress Jiyo Tower. After it was activated, he knew everything that happened in Jiyo Tower. But unfortunately, he could only see the bottom 5 levels. So he still couldn't find Chu Luiyue's traces. I tried to stop him just now, but I couldn't. Sun Zhongyan looked at the black karmic fire that was burning wildly below and said solemnly. Elder Wei Yin was shocked. How could this be? Sun Zhongyan held the silver pestle and controlled the entire locking heaven formation. If he really tried to stop him, how could Rongxiu still enter? How could Sun Zhongyan not know what he was thinking? In fact, he was also very shocked and confused. When he sensed Rongxiu's aura, he knew that something was wrong and immediately sent out a force to stop him. But it didn't seem to have any effect on Rongxiu. Suddenly, Sun Zhongyan was shocked. Rongxiu has already entered the 1st level. Elder Wei Yun's mouth was wide open. He was so shocked that he stuttered. Why? Why isn't the door closed? How did he go in? He saw with his own eyes that Jiyo Tower's door closed by itself. At that time, even he was excluded. Rongxiu did not have the slightest bit of cultivation, so how did he open the door? Moreover, the entire 1st floor was burning. I don't know, but he did go in. And it's still going up. Sun Zhongyan looked at the flickering dots of light on the profound formation in front of him, and his heart also tightened. Now they couldn't afford to lose the 2 people in Jiyo Tower. Moreover, Even if it was out of selfishness, he absolutely did not wish to see anything happen to the two of them. Rong Xiu probably has a protective yuan instrument on him. That's why he was able to enter safely, but that shouldn't last for too long. Elder Wei Yin thought for a while, and felt that this was the only plausible explanation. But no matter what, we still have to find a way to bring them out. Sun Zhongyan suddenly sucked in a cold breath. When Elder Wei Yin saw the change in his expression, his heart sank. He actually went up to the second level. Sun Zhongyan said in shock. How is this possible? His body is weak, and he can't cultivate. It's already a coincidence that he could enter the first level. How can he go up to the second level? He's not a stage 2 warrior. Lu Yu is a stage 2 warrior, but there's no trace of him on the second level. Sun Zhongyan gritted his teeth and said. Elder Wei Yin was instantly speechless. After a while he asked hesitantly, so you're saying that he's indeed above the 5th level? Sun Zhongyan closed his eyes. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed it. Juyo Tower had a strict hierarchy, and every level was blocked by a barrier. No one had ever been able to go up. But now, the truth was right in front of his eyes, and he had no choice but to believe it. Boom! Just as the two of them were talking, the flames below Juyo Tower burned even more vigorously. Sun Zhongyan mobilized all the force in his body and poured it into the silver pestle. The gigantic profound formation in the sky became even more vibrant. It was oppressive. The two forces entered a frenzied confrontation. The commotion caused by Juyo Tower quickly attracted the attention of many powerful figures in the imperial city. Mu Qinghe, who was resting in her room, suddenly opened her eyes and looked in the direction of Juyo Tower. He stared at it for a while and muttered softly, "Looks like a beast is about to emerge. Looks like a ferocious beast is about to be born. I didn't think there would be such an existence here." Country Yaochen really had a lot of secrets. At that moment, Hong Yao suddenly flew over. Its ruby-like eyes stared intently at Juyo Tower. Mu Qinghe looked down at it. Hong Yao had been unhappy since it came back yesterday. It refused to say anything when she asked it. It only stubbornly buried its head under its wings and remained motionless. Mu Qinghe knew that it was throwing a tantrum, but she didn't intend to coax it. Hong Yao's temper was getting worse. In the past, it would complain to that person every time, and he had no choice but to give in several times. But it was different now. That person was long gone. If Hong Yao continued acting like this, it would cause big trouble sooner or later. Therefore, Mu Qinghe had already made up her mind to treat Hong Yao's temper. Since Hong Yao didn't move, he didn't do anything and allowed it to sulk by itself. Seeing that Hong Yao was on high alert, and its eyes were burning with anger, he suddenly understood and frowned. "Where did you go previously?" Hong Yao ignored him. It flapped its wings and was about to fly away. Mu Qinghe crossed her arms and said lightly, "Your cultivation seems to be deteriorating. It seems that your cultivation is indeed declining with each passing day. Now even a suppressed ferocious beast is able to injure you." Hong Yao turned its head angrily and glared at him. He didn't know what was going on, and was just spouting nonsense. That beast was indeed suppressed under Juyo Tower, but it didn't mean that it was weak. Furthermore, it wasn't prepared at all, and was injured by that beast. If it was serious, it would definitely be able to beat that beast to a pulp. Mu Qinghe narrowed her eyes when she saw Hong Yao's reaction. Hong Yao had always been proud and arrogant. It wouldn't even take a second look at ordinary fiends. For it to have such a huge reaction, it was enough to prove that the suppressed ferocious beast's level wasn't low. He had a thought, and his figure disappeared from the spot instantly. Hong Yao widened its eyes. Again, he didn't want it to go, but wasn't he going now? Green flames burned on Hong Yao's body, and it quickly rushed toward Juyo Tower. "I must take this opportunity to take revenge." On the other side, Fu Yinshan, Cheng Han, and the rest also felt that something was amiss. When they realized that the commotion was coming from Tianlu Academy, they were all shocked and rushed over. They weren't worried that the people of Tianlu Academy would encounter any danger, but they were shocked by the terrifying commotion. When they reached the outside of the academy, they saw Juyo Tower burning crazily from afar. The black flames had already surrounded the lower levels of Juyo Tower, making it look like purgatory. Above Juyo Tower, Sun Zhongyan and the rest were working together to suppress it. However, that huge Xian formation was on the verge of collapsing. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 293. Roar. A roar was heard again. Dark clouds gathered in the sky. Thunder rumbled. The appearance of rare treasures, or high-level magical beasts, would trigger a phenomenon in the heavens and earth. There's a fiend trapped under Juyo Tower? Fu Yunshan exclaimed in shock. Cheng Han's face darkened. Rumor has it that there's a pit of heavenly origins under Juyo Tower. If there's a fiend hidden there, it's most likely a ferocious beast. However, he had never heard of such a thing before. That ferocious beast seems extraordinary. Not only did it cause such a huge commotion, but it also seems like it's going to break free from Juyo Tower. Sun Zhongyan's Xian formation won't last long. Cheng Han muttered to himself, and many emotions flashed across his eyes. Fu Yunshan hurriedly said, "Then we have to hurry and help. If that ferocious beast comes out, I'm afraid." "What are you afraid of?" Cheng Han suddenly interrupted him, and raised his brows with a strange expression. "This is Juyo Tower. Even if something really happens, it's Tianlu Academy's business. Is it up to outsiders like us to interfere? That Xian formation is obviously Juyo Tower's seal, which means that they already knew that there was a ferocious beast hiding under Juyo Tower, and made ample preparations. What's the point of us doing anything now? We might even get into trouble in the end." Fu Yunshan glanced at him. "You mean?" "I don't mean anything. Brother Yunshan, if you want to help, just go ahead. I don't want to get involved in this mess." With that, Cheng Han took a step back. "Brother Yunshan, please." Fu Yunshan was instantly embarrassed. Actually, he had just said it casually, but after seeing Cheng Han's attitude, he could not help but feel a little nervous. Nobody knew what was down there, and it was indeed very dangerous to go there now. He did not intend to sacrifice his life for Tianlu Academy. Cheng Han's words were not without reason. In the end, this was Tianlu Academy's business, and it had nothing to do with them. It was better to observe the situation first. Then let's take a look first. That Xian formation has already been set up. If we go there rashly, I'm afraid we'll bring trouble to them. Fu Yunshan coughed and decided to watch from the sidelines. Cheng Han sneered in his heart. Just now, he had heard people from Tianlu Academy discussing that Chu Luiyue was still trapped in Juyo Tower. This was a heaven-sent opportunity. If they could take advantage of this opportunity to get rid of Chu Luiyue, it would save them a lot of effort. He looked at the black karmic fire that was still spreading, and an undetectable cold smile flashed across his eyes. It was such a pity that such a genius was going to fall just like that. Sun Zhongyan and the rest quickly realized that even though they had successfully activated the locking heaven formation, they were not strong enough to suppress Juyo Tower. Not only did the flames not have the slightest intention of extinguishing, they became even more rampant. As the two forces clashed, the heaven sealing array gradually fell into a disadvantageous position. If this continued, the heaven sealing array would break sooner or later. At that time, the situation would be completely out of control. It was at this moment that Sun Zhongyan sensed another wave of fluctuation, coming from the profound formation. Rong Xiu had actually reached the third floor. He opened his mouth, but he was so shocked that he didn't know what to say. He didn't know what was going on with Rong Xiu, such as whether he was injured or not, but he was sure that Rong Xiu had passed through the barriers of the second and third floors consecutively. How exactly did he do it? Elder Wei Yun saw that Sun Zhongyan's expression wasn't right, and he vaguely guessed something in his heart. Rong Xiu is still going up? Sun Zhongyan nodded with difficulty. With Chu Luiyue in front of him, the things that Rong Xiu had done didn't seem so shocking anymore. However, why did Rong Xiu go in? This was what Elder Wei Yun couldn't figure out the most. It was impossible that he didn't know how dangerous it was inside. Suddenly, a thought flashed across his mind. Could it be? It can't be for Chu Luiyue, right? When Sun Zhongyan heard this, he couldn't help but sigh. Otherwise, what else could it be? I didn't even notice it before. Previously, he thought that the two of them only knew each other. But it seemed like it wasn't just that. Kacha! A crisp shattering sound was suddenly heard. Sun Zhongyan looked over, and his pupils suddenly constricted. He saw that a crack had suddenly appeared in the middle of Juyo Tower. Juyo Tower had actually cracked. A cluster of black karmic fire crazily surged out from within. As a result, half of Juyo Tower was engulfed in flames. Sun Zhongyan's face was a little pale. Juyo Tower had existed for thousands of years, and had weathered countless storms, but it had never been damaged in the slightest. But now roar! Suddenly, accompanied by a ferocious roar, a cluster of black flames rose abruptly. That flame rapidly transformed into a huge eagle in midair, and rushed towards the locking heaven formation above Juyo Tower. It's the illusion of that ferocious beast. Elder Wei Yin exclaimed in shock. The appearance of that eagle was exactly the same as the carving on the door of Juyo Tower. He had guarded Juyo Tower for many years, and was very familiar with everything in Juyo Tower. Thus, he immediately recognized that eagle the moment he saw it. He never expected that such a ferocious beast was actually hiding under Juyo Tower. Boom! Its speed was extremely fast, and everyone could only see a black trace streaking past. The next moment, it had already collided with the Xian formation. Seal! Sun Zhongyan shouted fiercely. The force in his body surged out. The other elders and teachers were also stunned by this scene. When they heard Sun Zhongyan's voice, they finally reacted and increased their force once again. Bam! A huge collision sound was heard. Countless sparks and light scattered in all directions. The silver pestle in the middle seemed to be affected as well, and it shook violently. With this movement, the Xian formation in the sky also started to fluctuate. It looked as if it would break apart at any time. Elder Sun, this side can't hold on any longer. A teacher shouted loudly. Just as he finished speaking, the starlight under his feet suddenly exploded. The terrifying impact backfired, and he couldn't dodge at all. He spat out blood, and his body flew backward. The spot where he was previously at quickly dimmed. The illusion formed by the black karmic fire seemed to have found this weak spot. It immediately changed its direction, and charged in that direction. Quick, stop it! Sun Zhongyan shouted hurriedly. However, it was already too late. This locking heaven formation was extremely huge. All the Xian masters in the academy were here, and they barely managed to activate this Xian formation together. Everyone could only be responsible for a part of it. Now that one person suddenly made a mistake, the others simply couldn't fill in time. In the blink of an eye, that black illusion had already rushed to the dim gap. Its body was wrapped in a terrifying aura, and it was extremely valiant. This time, it could probably completely destroy the locking heaven formation. Digression. I'm going out for lunch in the afternoon, and I'll probably have to wait until nighttime for the remaining 2 updates. Chapter 294. Condense. A low and powerful voice suddenly sounded. At the same time, everyone saw a silver ray of light falling. It covered the broken Xian formation. The moment the two forces came into contact, they immediately merged. The area that was originally dark instantly brightened up. The Xian formation, that was previously on the verge of collapsing, instantly stabilized with the infusion of this energy. Everyone looked over, and saw a gray figure slowly walking over from the void. When Sun Zhongyan saw that person, he immediately exclaimed in surprise. Uncle Master! Who else could it be if not Tianlu Academy's director Yi Zhiting? He was still wearing the gray cotton shirt, and holding a fan in his hand. There were no waves of force on him, and he looked very simple. He was no different from an ordinary elder. However, everyone present knew that he was the most powerful person here. When the teachers and students in the academy saw Yi Zhiting, they all heaved a sigh of relief. Cheng Han and Fu Yunshan, who were secretly observing from afar, were shocked. They didn't expect Yi Zhiting to suddenly appear at this time. He came out just in time. Cheng Han glared at that figure and gritted his teeth. Fu Yunshan could not help but whisper. After so many years, old Yi seems to have become even stronger. Cheng Han felt increasingly frustrated. Of course, he could see this too. He originally thought that he could win against Yi Zhiding once in the Imperial City and redeem himself. He felt rather regretful that Yi Zhiding didn't appear. After knowing that Yi Zhiding had a disciple, he thought that it wouldn't be a bad idea to let Situ Xingqian win against his disciple. However, he didn't expect Yi Zhiding's disciple to be Chu Luiyue. Also, Chu Luiyue took first place in both the warrior and Xian master competitions. What frustrated him the most was that even Situ Xingqian's first place in celestial physician was actually obtained by Chu Luiyue. Later, he regretted it immensely and actually agreed to Chu Luiyue's suggestion to replace Situ Xingqian. He originally had a stomach full of anger, but he didn't expect Jiuyou Tower to change just as he was about to leave the Imperial City. Yi Zhiding also came out. Most importantly, Yi Zhiding's cultivation level was obviously higher than before. Cheng Han was certain that if the two of them fought now, he still wouldn't be Yi Zhiding's match. Jiuyou Tower is in big trouble this time. I don't think they can resolve it so easily, Cheng Han said gloomily. Fu Yinshan was very hesitant. On the one hand, he didn't want to get involved in such a dangerous matter. Who knew what kind of existence was suppressed under Jiuyou Tower? On the other hand, he didn't want to offend Yi Zhiding because of this. Just as he was feeling conflicted, Yi Zhiding had already walked slowly to the shattered starlight. He waved the palm leaf fan in his hand, and a layer of starlight fell down. It drew a bright streak of light in the air, and finally landed on the silver pestle in the middle of the heaven ceiling formation. The silver pestle, which had been swaying a little, began to spin rapidly again. Moreover, it once again unleashed a powerful force that spread out in all directions. The huge heaven ceiling formation once again shone brightly. The black figure seemed to sense a threat as it stopped, and stared at Yi Zhiding warily. It was very clear that Yi Zhiding's arrival would be a great threat to it. Both parties were in a stalemate. Yi Zhiding looked at it. His eyes, which had always been old and turbid, were now extremely bright and filled with suppression. Evil creature! How dare you! His voice boomed like thunder. Light intersected above the heaven ceiling formation. A hint of struggle flashed across the black figure's scarlet eyes. As the dean of Tianlu Academy, Yi Zhiding was also the true owner of the silver pestle. Now that he was here, the heaven ceiling formation's power was naturally more than twice as strong as before. Go! Yi Zhiding waved the palm leaf fan in his hand again. The huge heaven ceiling formation undulated like waves on the sea. Roar! The black figure let out a painful roar. Then its entire body was actually split apart. It transformed into countless black sparks that scattered in all directions. Even the black karmic fire that was burning below seemed to be affected as it retreated a lot and didn't continue moving upwards. When Sun Zhongyan and the rest saw this, their hearts finally settled down. Uncle Master, you're finally out of seclusion, Sun Zhongyan said agitatedly. If he was any later, the heaven ceiling formation would have really been broken by that evil creature. Yi Zhiding laughed out loud. If I still didn't come out, the entire academy would have been destroyed by this evil creature. Sun Zhongyan lowered his head in guilt. It's all because we're useless. You're not to blame for this. This evil creature wanted to come out long ago, but it didn't find a suitable opportunity. I happened to be at the juncture of a breakthrough, so I didn't pay much attention to it. A moment of carelessness led to today's situation. Yi Zhiding shook his head, but he didn't blame Sun Zhongyan and the rest. Sun Zhongyan asked hesitantly, Then, Uncle Master, what do you think we should do now? That evil creature clearly hasn't been completely subdued. Also, Uncle Master, there's already a crack on Jiuyou Tower. I'm afraid we can't continue suppressing this evil creature in the future. This is even more troublesome. Yi Zhiding glanced at Jiuyou Tower. Indeed, there was a clear crack on the tower. His expression instantly turned serious. In this case, things are much more troublesome than I expected. His gaze landed on the heaven ceiling formation again, wanting to find a way to solve this problem. Suddenly his gaze focused. There's still someone in Jiuyou Tower? Sun Zhongyan's heart skipped a beat, and he wiped the sweat off his forehead. Yes. Who's the one on the 4th floor? 7th Prince Princely. Sun Zhongyan didn't dare to hide anything and immediately answered. Yi Jiding furrowed his brows tightly. How did he go in? This. Without waiting for Sun Zhongyan's reply, Yi Jiding discovered something even more shocking. There's still someone on the 5th floor? Sun Zhongyan couldn't be bothered anymore, and hurriedly nodded. Yes, Lu Yu is still on the 5th floor. Can you see which floor she's on? Uncle Master is stronger than me, so he can see the situation on the higher floors. Upon hearing the familiar name, the corners of Yi Jiding's eyes twitched. Who did you say? Sun Zhongyan choked and lowered his voice. Chu Luyue. Yi Jiding's vision turned black. I only have one precious disciple. Such a thing actually happened. How dangerous is Juyo Tower now? Won't she be dead if she goes in? How did she go up? Sun Zhongyan was on the brink of tears. I really want to know too. Yi Jiding was anxious. He hurriedly focused and looked at the heaven-ceiling formation again, wanting to check on Chu Luyue's current situation. When he saw it, his expression turned ugly. I can only sense that she's on the upper floors, but I can't sense which floor she's on. Now I only know that she's not on the 6th floor. That means she's at least on the 7th floor. How can she go to such a hellish place? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 295. Sun Zhongyan was so shocked by this that he couldn't react for a while. This means that Rong Xiu is already on the 4th level, and Chu Luyue is most likely on the 7th level. This, Uncle Master, what should we do now? Even though Sun Zhongyan had been through a lot, he still panicked in this situation. Yi Jiding furrowed his brows and was extremely anxious. He kept waving the fan in his hand up and down. This bastard is determined to come out. If we can't completely deal with it, I'm afraid no one will be able to enter Juyo Tower. Not to mention, he wasn't completely confident that he could completely suppress Juyo Tower when it was broken. Even if he could, how much time would it take? Could Chu Luyue and Rong Xiu, who were inside, safely wait until then? Now that the black karmic fire had been released, half of the tower was probably filled with this fire. The two of them were probably in an extremely dangerous situation. Yi Jiding suddenly rushed toward Juyo Tower. However, at this moment, a ball of black karmic fire rose again. Waves of heat surged and blocked Yi Jiding outside. Crack! Another crack appeared on Juyo Tower. More and more flames surged out. The air around Juyo Tower became extremely hot, and even the trees at the side were burning. Yi Jiding stared at Juyo Tower, and his heart gradually sank. Everyone listen to my orders. Activate the locking heaven formation. Suppress this bastard. An old and deep voice spread far and wide, echoing in the sky above Tianlu Academy. Yes, all the elders and teachers answered in unison. While the outside world was in chaos, there was an eerie silence in Juyo Tower. 7th level. Unlike the 6th level, the 7th level was empty. It was a complete and huge space. At this moment, Chu Luyue was standing in this huge space and looking at the scene in front of her. She was shocked and couldn't calm down for a long time. In front of her was a huge, transparent, three-legged cauldron. It was unknown what material this cauldron was made of. It was neither stone nor jade, and it was colorless. There were strange patterns carved on the outside. Perhaps because it was too old, the pattern on it had become somewhat blurry. Chu Luyue looked at it for a long time, but he couldn't recognize the pattern on it. However, this was nothing. What was more important was that there was a ball of black karmic fire burning wildly within the cauldron. The entire space became incomparably hot because of the existence of this flame, and the flames inside were crazily rushing out. If Chu Luyue could go out now, he would know that the black karmic fire that was crazily spreading under Juyo Tower came from this cauldron. However, she was certain that this flame was exactly the same as the one engraved on the door of Juyo Tower. When she first entered Juyo Tower, she was burned by the illusory flames and almost lost her life. From the looks of it, it was this thing. A ferocious and ruthless aura continuously gushed out from the transparent medicinal cauldron. Chu Luyue took a deep breath. Previously, when Dumpling swallowed the 7th level's barrier, she followed Dumpling up to the 7th level. When she came up, she saw everything in front of her. She never thought that there would be such a strange flame hidden on the 7th level of Juyo Tower. According to her understanding of Juyo Tower, this thing had probably existed here since the beginning. It was really strange. The Cave of Heavenly Origins was a rare sacred place for cultivation. No one would trap a fiend here, much less leave behind such a strange flame. This thing was sinister and cold. Even though there was still a distance between them, Chu Luyue felt a chill in her heart. It was hard to imagine who had set up so many things in Juyo Tower back then. Suddenly, 2 balls of red light appeared in the flame. In the next moment, Chu Luyue suddenly realized that it wasn't red light, but a pair of scarlet eyes. She had seen this pair of eyes before. They were the eyes of that eagle. She had felt the threat of this pair of eyes countless times, so she could recognize it at once. However, compared to before, seeing it with her own eyes this time brought her even greater shock. That bone-chilling and terrifying aura enveloped her, making it almost impossible for her to escape. Chu Luyue's blood seemed to have frozen. Only her heart was beating wildly. She walked forward almost uncontrollably. At this moment, Dumpling, who was squatting on her shoulder, suddenly jumped up. Furthermore, it let out a threatening cry of warning. Chu Luyue was shocked. Only then did she come back to her senses and stop in her tracks. Immediately after, she broke out in a cold sweat. She was actually bewitched by that pair of eyes just now. Once she got close, it would be dangerous. She frowned as she looked at the crazily burning flame and asked word by word, "Who are you? Who are you, and why do you keep targeting me?" What answered her was a hissing sound. The other party clearly didn't intend to answer her question. Chu Luyue looked at Dumpling. "Dumpling, can you tell what fiend it is?" Dumpling sized it up and shook its head. Chu Luyue's mind raced. She had seen many high-level fiends in her previous life, but the eagle-type ones didn't seem to be similar to this one. For a moment, she couldn't be sure of the other party's true identity. But she could be sure of one thing. This beast really wanted to get out of here. She didn't know if this transparent medicine cauldron was used to seal it or to rear it. Chu Luyue didn't dare to act recklessly. Just as she was deep in thought, a trace of biting cold murderous intent flashed in that pair of scarlet eyes. The next moment, a ball of black karmic fire transformed into a pair of huge wings and flew towards her. Fierce eyes and sharp beak. In the blink of an eye, it rushed in front of Chu Luyue. Chu Luyue was shocked and wanted to retreat immediately. However, that terrifying aura almost made her unable to move. Just in this moment of hesitation, her body was already enveloped by that pair of wings. Dumpling's hair stood on end and wanted to rush up immediately. At this moment, the water droplet that was quietly suspended in Chu Luyue's dantian suddenly spun rapidly. Digression. Phew. Time for dinner. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 296. A vast oppressive aura suddenly descended. A powerful devouring force was emitted from the water droplet. The phantom that was about to reach Chu Luyue seemed to have sensed danger. A trace of panic flashed across its eyes, and it quickly retreated. A red flame surged out from Chu Luyue's body. It chased after the phantom crazily. Chi! In the blink of an eye, the two flames, one black and one red, collided. A piercing sound was heard. The black phantom seemed to have encountered something terrifying. It quickly retreated and returned to the transparent medicine cauldron. However, the red flame still chased after the edge of the medicine cauldron. It burned fiercely. A grayish-white smoke was emitted. Roar! The black karmic fire in the transparent medicine cauldron suddenly went out of control, as if it had been greatly agitated. And that mournful cry came from within. Chu Luyue looked at the scene in shock. The red flame came out on its own. She did not have time to think about anything just now. The water droplet in her dantian was the first to exert force. It chased the black phantom back. To be precise, the black karmic fire was fleeing in a sorry state. Chu Luyue could feel the deep fear in the beast's heart, even through the transparent medicine cauldron. Is this the soul of some kind of demonic beast? Chu Luyue muttered softly. She saw clearly that when the black karmic fire rose, there was no demonic beast's physical body inside. However, what kind of demonic beast could survive for 1,000 years with only a soul? The doubts in Chu Liyue's heart grew. She stared at the scene in front of her and frowned. At this moment, the red flame had transformed into a huge fence, completely surrounding the transparent medicine cauldron. That mournful cry gradually became weaker. Dumpling swung its tail at the side, as if it was regretful that it could not deal with the beast personally. Chu Liyue stood in the same spot for a long time with a subtle expression. In fact, although the crimson flame had appeared very suddenly, she had sensed it. For example, she seemed to have sensed the beast's fear and retreat. It seemed like it wanted to surrender. Chu Liyue carefully sensed it, and found that he seemed to be able to control the red flame. With a wave of her hand, the flame flew back into her palm. The originally arrogant black karmic fire had already wilted. In comparison, it was obviously not a match for Chu Liyue's flames. Chu Liyue couldn't help but look down. On his palm, there was only a small cluster of dancing red flames. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, no one would have thought that the flames actually contained such a powerful force. This scarlet flame was clearly from the water droplet. Its color was very similar to the red words that had appeared on the water droplet. Chu Liyue suppressed all the thoughts that flashed through his mind and looked ahead. Admit defeat or continue. 5th floor of Juyo Tower. The black karmic fire was quickly spreading upwards from below. From the inside to the outside, it was filled with blazing flames. At a glance, it was like purgatory. However, in this sea of fire, there was a person walking up slowly. He was dressed in white, and his figure was tall and slender. Every step he took was casual and calm. In the endless darkness, he was the only white. With every step he took, the flames in front of him would automatically part and open up a path. He walked alone, and the two simple yet extreme colors reflected each other like an eternal painting. Soon, he reached the barrier of the 6th floor. He stood at the top of the stairs, and his deep gaze swept across the barrier. Then, he reached out his palm and slowly placed it on the barrier. He seemed to be able to feel a trace of residual heat. That was her aura. Rongxiu sighed softly. I thought that she would at most reach the 6th floor, but I didn't expect that. He curled his fingers slightly, and the barrier spread silently. He continued to walk up. Rongxiu has already reached the 6th floor. Yi Jiding, who had been paying attention to the situation in Juyo Tower, suddenly exclaimed. Sun Zhongyan's eyelids twitched harshly. One Chu Liyue isn't enough. Why is Rongxiu also? How did the two of them do it? He pondered for a while and finally said, Uncle Master, actually this might not be a bad thing. The bottom 5 floors of Juyo Tower are already surrounded by the black karmic fire. If we can escape to the top, we might be able to avoid it. Zhongyan, I remember that you've been to the 5th floor before, right? Sun Zhongyan nodded in confusion. Yi Jiding sighed softly. Then, do you think the fire below is more dangerous, or the floors above? Sun Zhongyan was speechless. He clearly remembered that the pressure would increase with every level he ascended. Whether it was Chu Liyue or Rongxiu, they didn't seem to have enough ability to support it. Director, the fire seems to be a little smaller. Not far away, Bai Chen suddenly shouted. The others hurriedly looked over, and indeed realized that the fire that had reached the 5th floor didn't continue to go up. Also, compared to before, it did seem to be a little weaker. Yi Jiding stared at it for a while, but his expression didn't relax at all. Instead, his brows furrowed even more tightly. Sun Zhongyan was about to say, That's great. When he turned and saw Yi Jiding's expression, his smile suddenly froze. Uncle Master, what's wrong? Something's wrong, Yi Jiding muttered softly. Sun Zhongyan took another look and asked in confusion, Something's wrong. Something's wrong? What's wrong? Isn't that ferocious beast suppressed by our locking heaven formation? I think the fire seems to be a lot smaller. This should be a sign that they're going to win. Yi Jiding didn't say anything, and only shook his head slowly. Something's wrong indeed. The locking heaven formation didn't suddenly increase its power, and the ferocious beast's transformation was too sudden. Could it be that something happened in Juyo Tower? For some reason, he felt a little uneasy, as if something was about to happen. Screech. At this moment, a crisp chirp sounded from afar. Everyone looked up, and saw a palm-sized green sparrow flying rapidly toward Juyo Tower. It was extremely fast and green flames were burning on its body. From afar it looked like a green fireball. That's a 7th grade fiend, a green sparrow? Yi Jiding was shocked. Sun Zhongyan hurriedly explained. Uncle Master, that's the fiend of the Tianling dynasty's era, Mu Qinghe. Yi Jiding had been in seclusion previously, so he didn't know what was happening in the outside world. However, he heard the words Tianling dynasty very clearly. He was shocked. When he looked carefully, he indeed saw a young man following behind the green sparrow. He was dressed in ordinary clothes and had a handsome face. However, the scar on his left eye made him look even more stern and oppressive. What surprised Yi Jiding the most was that he couldn't see through the other party's cultivation level. Hong Yao was furious when it saw the burning black karmic fire. It flapped its wings and flew toward Juyo Tower. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from LoveWeb. Chapter 297. Mu Qinghe frowned when she saw the burning Juyo Tower. His heart skipped a beat when he saw Hong Yao rushing inside. But he didn't stop it. In the blink of an eye, Hong Yao had already passed through the black karmic fire, and its small figure disappeared into Juyo Tower. Before Sun Zhongyan could stop it, he discovered that the azure sparrow had already disappeared before his eyes. He looked at Yi Jiding hesitantly. Yi Jiding was very calm. That's a 7th grade fiend. Nothing will happen to it. At the very least, there's still its master. Sun Zhongyan was then relieved. That's right. I almost forgot that Mu Qinghe is here too. He looked at Mu Qinghe and cupped his hands. Vice Admiral Mu, why are you here? Mu Qinghe's tone was calm. After such a big commotion, the entire imperial city knows about it. Many people had already arrived outside Tianlu Academy, let alone him. Sun Zhongyan was a little awkward. Mu Qinghe stared at the burning flames on Juyo Tower and frowned. I didn't expect such a ferocious beast to be hidden under Juyo Tower. He was still a little confused previously, as he didn't know what kind of fiend could hurt Hong Yao. But now he understood a little after seeing this scene. Sun Zhongyan did not know how to respond. After hesitating for a moment he said worriedly, Vice Admiral Mu, this place is very dangerous now. Your fiend just ran in. It would be fine if nothing happened. But if something happened, they wouldn't be able to escape responsibility. Mu Qinghe's expression was still cold. It knows what it's doing. Although it's a little dangerous, it's definitely not fatal. It's not impossible to let Hong Yao train for a while. Since Mu Qinghe said that, Sun Zhongyan couldn't persuade her anymore. He returned to Yi Jiding's side and activated the locking heaven formation together. Mu Qinghe's gaze slowly swept across the locking heaven formation and finally landed on the silver pestle in the middle. A look of surprise flashed across her eyes. That thing, this small Tianlu Academy, seems to be much more complicated than I imagined. Hong Yao easily passed through the black karmic fire without any damage. However, it took some effort to enter the sealed Juyo Tower. The door below was locked, and the windows on the other floors were all closed. In the end, it finally found the crack in the middle of the tower and flew in against the flames that were constantly gushing out. Puff! Chu Luiyue was confronting the beast when he suddenly heard a strange sound coming from above. She looked up and saw a familiar green figure flying towards her. She widened her eyes in shock. Red Demon? Why are you here? After saying that, she suddenly realized that her tone was too familiar, so she immediately looked behind Hong Yao vigilantly. Fortunately, Mu Qinghe did not follow. Red Demon flapped its wings and flew in. At a glance, it saw the transparent medicine cauldron below, as well as the black flames that were crazily burning in it. Within it, it felt a familiar threat. It was this fellow who had caused it to be injured. Red Demon widened its eyes and was about to rush up to take revenge. However, at this moment, it suddenly heard Chu Luiyue's voice. It looked up in shock and saw that Chu Luiyue was also here. It was pleasantly surprised and hurriedly turned around and flew toward Chu Luiyue. Before it could fly over, a red shadow flashed and blocked its path. It was Dumpling. Just like before, Dumpling stared at Hong Yao vigilantly, making it clear that she did not want it to get close to Chu Luyue. Hong Yao was also annoyed, and the flames on its body suddenly rose. The two little ones were in a confrontation again. Chu Luyue looked at them helplessly. He knew that when these two were together, they would always be at odds. How could they fight as soon as they met? Dumpling. Chu Luyue's tone contained a faint warning. Tuanzi was not convinced, so she snorted and refused to retreat. Hong Yao also did not give in and stared at Dumpling. Chu Luyue said, "If you want to fight, go out and fight now." The two little ones froze at the same time. Chu Luyue continued, "Dumpling, I won't help you. Hong Yao is a 7th grade demonic beast. You may not be its opponent now." Dumpling held its head in annoyance. Hong Yao's eyes flashed with a trace of pride, and it bit its wings. "And Hong Yao?" Chu Luyue looked at it again. "If you kill my demonic beast, you know the consequences." Hong Yao was stunned. Dumpling was very proud. She turned around and shook her, but at Hong Yao arrogantly. Hong Yao was so angry that it turned around a few times. Finally, it stopped and looked at Chu Luyue pitifully. Her ruby-like eyes were instantly filled with tears, turning even redder. It was so angry that it cried. Chu Luyue's heart suddenly softened. In fact, she knew that Hong Yao just wanted to come to her side. After all, she used to help Mu Qinghe raise it for so long. And every time it was angry with Mu Qinghe, she always helped it vent its anger. Hong Yao had always been very dependent on her. It was even closer to her than its real master Mu Qinghe. As a reincarnated human, Hong Yao could recognize her. How could she not be moved? She didn't know how Hong Yao had lived for more than a year. Finally, she sighed softly and waved her hand. "Hong Yao." Dumpling suddenly froze and looked up at Chu Luyue in disbelief. Chu Luyue glanced at it. Dumpling immediately became obedient. Although it was still angry, it didn't dare to really anger Chu Luyue. When Red Demon heard the summon, it flew over in surprise and joy. Seeing that it was about to jump into her arms again, Chu Luyue smiled helplessly and dotingly. However, when it arrived in front of her, Hong Yao suddenly stopped. It looked at Chu Luyue hesitantly with a timid look in its eyes. It had imagined such a scene countless times, but every time, it was like a bubble that burst. In fact, in more than a year, it had gradually accepted the fact that that person was no longer around. It was just that it was unwilling to admit it. But now she was right in front of it. What if it was still the same as before, dissipating with a touch? Seeing Hong Yao's hesitant and timid look, Chu Luyue's heart ached, and she softened her voice. "Yao Yao, come here." Hearing this, Hong Yao's body suddenly froze, but its eyes were filled with endless ecstasy. In this world, no one would call it that again. It finally stopped hesitating and jumped into Chu Luyue's arms. Chu Luyue raised her hand and gently stroked its head. Hong Yao's body trembled, and big drops of tears rolled down. Chu Luyue was very glad that she met Hong Yao here again. Otherwise, she would never dare to do this. Tuanzi looked at this scene angrily from the side. What was there to cry about? It didn't even cry. While thinking, it quickly stretched out its claws and wiped its face. Roar! At this moment, the beast in the medicine cauldron, which had already quieted down, roared again. Hong Yao turned around angrily. Then it quickly flew out. It didn't make a sound earlier or later, but chose this moment. This beast must be doing it on purpose. New hatred and old hatred. I'll take revenge together. Digression. I'll update 4 chapters in the morning, and then I'll go out. I don't know if there will be 5 chapters today. Don't wait. Mobile users, please browse and read. Chapter 298. The red demon flapped its wings, and 2 balls of blue flames burned instantly. Behind it, an enormous azure phantom suddenly appeared. The suppression of a 7th grade fiend was unparalleled. Chu Luyue glanced at Hong Yao in shock. She didn't expect it to use a killer move right from the start. However, on second thought, Hong Yao seemed to have been injured by this thing previously. Hong Yao had always been very vengeful. How could it let it go just like that? This time, it must find a way to get back at Hong Yao. As if sensing the threat from Hong Yao, the black karmic fire in the transparent cauldron suddenly jumped violently. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes. This ferocious beast indeed doesn't give up. It showed weakness previously only because it was at a disadvantage. Suddenly, her gaze focused. There seemed to be a stream of light on the transparent cauldron. She felt that something was amiss and took a closer look. However, she didn't see anything this time. Screech! Hong Yao let out a clear cry and flapped its wings. The two green flames were flapped out harshly. They went straight for the transparent cauldron. Crack! Another crack appeared on Jiuyo Tower. Even more black flames gushed out from within. Seeing this scene, everyone was extremely nervous and speechless. Yi Jiding injected force into the silver pestle again. The suppression above the locking heaven formation increased again. However, the power in Jiuyo Tower seemed to have suddenly become violent. What's going on? Didn't the black flame stop for a while just now? Sun Zhongyan was shocked. Yi Jiding's expression was solemn. As expected, he felt that something was amiss just now. And it seemed like it was indeed so. The black karmic fire wasn't suppressed by the locking heaven formation, but by the ferocious beast. Although he didn't know where its power came from, he was certain that if the ferocious beast continued to become stronger, the locking heaven formation would eventually break. Bam! A rock suddenly peeled off Jiuyo Tower. Yi Jiding's heart suddenly sank. Jiuyo Tower is probably going to collapse. On the other side, Mu Qinghe's gaze focused. She actually saw a familiar green flame in the black karmic fire. Is Hong Yao fighting with that ferocious beast? It seems like the battle is intense. However, the situation of the red demon seemed a bit strange. Although it was proud and stubborn, it was also lazy. That ferocious beast had injured it before, so it would definitely take this opportunity to take revenge. But it seemed that there was no need to use such a killer move right from the start. After Red Demon went in, it seemed to be very excited. He thought for a moment, then suddenly asked Sun Zhongyan, "Is there anyone else in Jiuyo Tower?" Sun Zhongyan was very surprised. How did Vice Admiral Mu know? He had just arrived, so he shouldn't have had the time to hear the discussions of the people below, right? Mu Qinghe already had a vague guess in her heart. Chu Luiyue. Sun Zhongyan was stunned. Seeing his reaction, Mu Qinghe knew that she was right. Chu Luiyue was indeed in Jiuyo Tower. He looked at Jiuyo Tower again with a deep gaze. This Chu Luiyue really has a lot of mysteries. Is Vice Admiral Mu worried about Lu Yu? Sun Zhongyan asked tentatively. After all, Chu Luiyue had the Daijing Yuan Meridian, and he was the only person who had the chance to go to the Tianling dynasty with Mu Qinghe. It was normal for Mu Qinghe to be worried. Hearing this, Mu Qinghe didn't comment. Sun Zhongyan wiped the sweat off his forehead. Vice Admiral Mu, don't worry. Lu Yu is a student of our school, and also Uncle Master's disciple. We will save her no matter what. Mu Qinghe lifted her chin slightly, and her eyes were filled with scrutiny. Just by relying on this half-activated locking heaven formation, Sun Zhongyan was speechless. Mu Qinghe was right. This locking heaven formation seemed to be fully activated, but only half of its power was released. This was because Yi Jiding was around, and it was already better than before. But in reality, the real locking heaven formation was dozens of times more complicated than what was shown now. However, as their cultivation levels were limited, they could only perform to this standard with so many people working together. That complicated Xian formation pattern made him feel dizzy, just by looking at it for a while, let alone activating it. If he couldn't do it, the other Xian masters in the school naturally couldn't do it either. As a result, he fell into this awkward situation. His Majesty has arrived. Her Majesty has arrived. Suddenly, an anxious voice was heard from afar. Everyone was shocked. Why is Emperor Jiawen here at this time? The Empress is here too. Zuorong and the rest turned around and saw Emperor Jiawen rushing over as expected. The Empress followed closely behind. Chu Ning led a group of imperial guards over with the two of them. Your Majesty. Zuorong and the rest hurriedly went forward, and were about to bow when Emperor Jiawen stopped them. Where's seventh brother? This seventh brother naturally referred to the current seventh prince, Prince Li Rongxiu. Nobody expected his first sentence to be about Rongxiu, and they couldn't help but be dazed. Cold resentment flashed across the Empress's eyes, but it was fleeting, and nobody noticed it. After hearing that something happened at Juyo Tower, Emperor Jiawen immediately rushed over from the palace. She rarely saw Emperor Jiawen so nervous, so she didn't need to think to know who he was worried about. Isn't it all because Rongxiu is in Tianlu Academy? I originally thought that His Majesty bestowed the title of princely to Rongxiu, and it's already a great honor. I didn't expect him to favor Rongxiu to this extent. After not having him by his side for so many years, His Majesty still dotes on Rongxiu the most. Isn't all of this because of that woman? She's clearly been dead for so many years, but her soul still lingers around. How disgusting! The Empress's fingernails dug deep into her palms, but her expression didn't change as she gently advised from the side. Your Majesty, don't worry. Princely is blessed and he'll be fine. Didn't you say that all the students in the academy have left? Look, they're all over there. Princely will definitely be fine. Emperor Jiawen hurriedly looked up, and indeed saw all the students gathered together. Juyo Tower was burning in the distance, but it was still quite a distance away. Besides, the academy's elders and teachers were around, so there shouldn't be any problems. However, Emperor Jiawen scanned the surroundings and didn't see Rongxiu. He couldn't help but frown. Why isn't old Seven here? Zuorong was the first to react. When he heard Emperor Jiawen's question, he didn't know what to say. Your Majesty, princely. Looking at his hesitant appearance, Emperor Jiawen instantly had an ominous feeling. Where exactly is he? Zuorong looked down. Your Majesty, Princely is in Juyo Tower now. What? Emperor Jiawen felt as if he was struck by lightning, and his body suddenly shook. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from IUN. Chapter 299. The Empress hurriedly held on to Emperor Jiawen and worriedly said, Don't worry. Your Majesty, you must take care of your health. Emperor Jiawen held the Empress's wrist tightly, and finally stabilized himself. He anxiously looked at Juyo Tower as he was worried and angry. How could this be? Aren't all the other students here? Why is he in Juyo Tower? Zuorong and the others looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Boom! At that moment, the flames on Juyo Tower exploded again. It continued to spread upwards. Emperor Jiawen's heart twitched when he saw this, and he finally couldn't suppress the anger in his heart. His health isn't good to begin with, and you actually allowed him to enter Juyo Tower? What kind of intentions are you harboring? If anything happens to him, we will definitely not let you off easily. Emperor Jiawen had always respected Tianlu Academy's elders and teachers, so he had never spoken to them in such a tone. Therefore, when His Majesty shouted, everyone was taken aback. Only then did they realize that His Majesty was very worried about Princely. Zuorong explained helplessly, Your Majesty, please calm down. Actually, His Highness Princely went in himself. Emperor Jiawen was dazed, and his face was filled with suspicion. How is that possible? Rongxiu clearly knew that he was sick. How could he be so stupid as to enter Juyo Tower? We dare not deceive your Majesty, so we can only tell you the truth. In fact, all the students had been chased out of Juyo Tower before the anomaly. After that, the black karmic fire burned in Juyo Tower, but Princely entered Juyo Tower at that time. He swallowed hard. Elder Wei Yun and the others tried to stop him, but they failed. These two simple sentences contained a huge amount of information. Emperor Jiawen took a while before he recovered his senses. You're saying that he passed through the flames? Because of the shock, his voice was trembling. Zuorong and the others could only nod. Yes. In fact, how could they not be shocked? Rongxiu's actions were tantamount to courting death. Later on, we also tried to go in, but the fire was too big. There was nothing we could do. Zuorong lowered his head as he spoke. He himself knew that this explanation sounded very weak, even though it was true. However, they had indeed failed to protect Rongxiu. If something really happened to Rongxiu, Emperor Jiawen looked up and dazedly stared at Juyo Tower, which was surrounded by black karmic fire. His face turned pale, and he didn't say anything for a long time. The Empress stood beside him. Her wrist hurt from his unconsciously pinching. She didn't need to look to know that it was bruised. However, she calmly endured it. What was this bit of pain? Hearing that Rongxiu was trapped in Juyo Tower was enough to offset the pain. Could Rongxiu survive in such a dangerous place? Originally, he was still worrying about how to get rid of this thorn in his side. Who would have thought that he would send himself to death? Zuorong had made it clear that it was Rongxiu who insisted on going in. If he died, he could not blame anyone. At the very least, it had nothing to do with her and her son. The Empress suppressed the joy in her heart and tightly knitted her brows as she comforted him. Your Majesty, don't be anxious. Prince Li always knows his limits, and he must have his reasons for doing this. Now that Elder Yi is here, I'm sure Prince Li will be safe. However, Emperor Jiawen couldn't hear a single word. Elder Yi was indeed here, but everyone could tell that the locking heaven formation couldn't last much longer. Besides, even Juyo Tower was starting to collapse. Quickly think of a way to save Rongxiu. Emperor Jiawen muttered as he suddenly saw Mu Qinghe's figure from the corner of his eye. His eyes lit up as if he had seen the last straw. Vice Admiral Mu. Vice Admiral Mu. Upon hearing that, Mu Qinghe looked at Emperor Jiawen. He naturally knew about Emperor Jiawen's actions, and knew that Emperor Jiawen wanted to ask him for help. However, he didn't intend to help. Looking at Mu Qinghe's cold and nonchalant expression, Emperor Jiawen felt very uneasy. However, at this juncture, he couldn't think of any other solution. Thus he could only beg, Vice Admiral Mu, you're very capable. You can definitely. Don't save him. Mu Qinghe straightforwardly interrupted Emperor Jiawen, leaving no room for negotiation. Emperor Jiawen's face turned even paler. Just as he was about to continue fighting, Mu Qinghe spoke again. He's not in any danger now. Why should I save him? Inside Juyo Tower. Bang! Hong Yao suffered a blow, and its body flew backward before landing harshly on the floor. The green fire on its body also became much weaker. Hong Yao. Chu Luiyue immediately went forward. Hong Yao struggled to get up, but it still collapsed in the end. On its wing, there was a bloody wound. Chu Luiyue carefully carried it up and turned around to take a look. The aura of the illusion formed by the black karmic fire in the transparent cauldron was also much weaker. The two of them fought intensely, and actually ended in a draw. Chu Luiyue knew that Hong Yao had previously fought with the other party, and was injured. Thus, she didn't dare to underestimate it at all. However, she didn't expect Hong Yao to be on par with the other party when it went all out. If this thing really escaped, she really didn't know how much trouble it would cause. At this moment, Chu Luiyue saw another ray of light flash across the transparent cauldron. This time it was much clearer than before. Chu Luiyue could even tell that the ray of light seemed to follow the strange pattern on the cauldron. She didn't know if it was her imagination. She kept feeling that after the ray of light flashed, the pattern on the cauldron seemed to be clearer than before. Hong Yao lay in Chu Luiyue's arms, but it still stared at the cauldron with indignance. It was already embarrassing enough to lose once previously, but it didn't expect it to lose the second time. If this spread out, its reputation would be ruined. Hong Yao moved and wanted to fight again, but it could only flap its wings weakly. Chu Luiyue said, "You're injured now, so you'd better behave yourself." Hong Yao immediately folded its wings obediently. However, thinking that it was useless after this fight, it couldn't help but bury its head in anger. Chu Luiyue understood. "You want me to help you take revenge?" Hong Yao poked its head out and answered aggrievedly. Dumpling glanced at it contemptuously and sneered. "It's useless." Hong Yao immediately glared at her fiercely. Chu Luiyue patted its head and smiled helplessly. "Okay, wait by the side." Hong Yao reluctantly left and flew to the side. Before leaving, it didn't forget to raise its head at the black karmic fire, looking arrogant as if it had found a backer. Chu Luiyue held her forehead. Hong Yao didn't seem to realize that she was no longer who she used to be. She really wasn't sure whether she could win or not. Thinking of this, she flipped her palm. With a thought, a cluster of red flames suddenly rose. Almost at the same time, above the transparent cauldron, endless light suddenly gushed out. The pattern on it quickly became clear. Boom. Digression. I'm going out and won't be back until very late. Therefore, there may not be 5 chapters. If there is, it will be very late. Everyone can watch it tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 300. The fire in the cauldron suddenly burned fiercely. Almost in the blink of an eye, the aura was many times stronger than before. Chu Luyue was taken aback as she took a step back from the terrifying heat wave. Then a pair of red eyes appeared again. All the fire in the surroundings quickly gathered. Chu Luyue's heart skipped a beat. Previously, when this ferocious beast took form, it only gathered a portion of the fire. It had never gathered all the fire like this. Boom! A loud sound suddenly came from above. Chu Luyue looked up and was shocked to see a ball of black karmic fire barging in from outside. It quickly merged with the illusion. Those were the flames that had surged outside previously. At this moment, for some reason, those flames actually all came back. Chu Luyue felt uneasy. As the fire kept gathering, the illusion became more and more solid. It also gradually had a huge and clear outline. Chu Luyue stared at it closely. That illusion looked exactly the same as the carving on Joyo Tower's door. It was a huge black eagle with its wings folded in front of its body. Only a pair of red eyes were filled with endless murderous intent. It made one shudder. Swoosh! Its wings suddenly spread open. A sharp screech reverberated in the entire Joyo Tower. Look! The fire on Joyo Tower is dissipating. Just as everyone was extremely nervous and worried that Joyo Tower would collapse, an exclamation was suddenly heard from the crowd. Everyone looked over in unison. Sun Zhongyan and the rest were pleasantly surprised. Uncle Master, it seems like the locking heaven formation is working. Yi Zhiding stared closely, and his expression suddenly changed. Oh no! Retreat! Everyone was confused. The next moment, Yi Zhiding suddenly flew toward the silver pestle in the middle. The fire outside Joyo Tower started surging in at an even faster speed. Yi Zhiding's hand hit the silver pestle harshly. Rich force surged in crazily. The power of the locking heaven formation increased again. At this point, everyone finally realized that the black fire wasn't extinguished. Instead, it was all surging in. Although they didn't know what was going on, anyone who saw this scene would feel that something was amiss. Bang! The cracks on Joyo Tower gradually expanded, and the outer layer started to peel off at an even faster speed. Through the broken Joyo Tower, everyone could only see an endless sea of black fire. The entire Joyo Tower seemed to have been occupied by the flames. Sun Zhongyan and the others felt their hearts clench tightly. The situation in Joyo Tower was extremely dangerous. Rong Xiu and Chu Luyue, who were still inside, were most likely dead. Emperor Jiawen quickly walked forward, wanting to find the familiar figure in the fire. The Empress quickly pulled him back. Your Majesty! Danger! Zhuorong and the others immediately stepped forward to stop him. What a joke! The people inside hadn't come out yet. How could they let more people in? Emperor Jiawen looked dejected, as if he had aged by more than 10 years in an instant. Seeing him like this, the Empress was both jealous and delighted. It would be better if he was dead. Not far away, the students who had gathered together finally couldn't help but whisper to each other. It's over. Joyo Tower is really going to collapse this time. I wonder what kind of ferocious beast is being suppressed down there. It's actually so powerful. If the director and the rest can't stop it. Pfft. What are you talking about? How can the director and the rest not have a way? Joyo Tower has existed for thousands of years, and the director and the elders are very strong. They can definitely suppress it again. But if Joyo Tower collapses, there's a pit of heavenly origins below. I really don't know what will happen after today. Be content. At least we're still alive. However, Prince Li and Chu Luyue inside are probably. At this point, Chu Ning, who had just finished instructing his subordinates, happened to hear this. He instantly looked at the few people who were speaking in shock. You are inside too? I came in a hurry just now, and only cared about telling the Imperial Guards to spread out and isolate Tianlu Academy. I didn't notice anything else at all. He immediately looked up and scanned his surroundings. As expected, he didn't see the familiar figure. He forcefully calmed himself down and made himself calm down. Then he took out the compass in his arms. The needle on the compass spun gently and finally pointed to Juyo Tower. Chu Ning's heart was filled with worry and relief. He was worried that was indeed trapped in Juyo Tower. Fortunately, since the compass still had a reaction, it proved that was still fine. He put away the compass and immediately rushed toward Juyo Tower. Lord Chu Ning, what are you trying to do? Zuorong saw Chu Ning's actions and hurriedly stopped him. Chu Ning stared at Juyo Tower. You are still inside. Rumble. Dark clouds gathered in the sky, and a sudden clap of thunder sounded. A silver lightning suddenly appeared in the rolling clouds. Soon after, the crowd saw that the lightning was rapidly descending and striking straight down. It went straight for Yi Jiding. Yi Jiding was forced to retreat quickly. Boom! The bolt of lightning struck the silver pestle with unparalleled precision. In the next moment, the lightning transformed into countless streaks of light that quickly spread down and covered the entire Juyo Tower. Bam! Above the heaven ceiling array, a star suddenly exploded. An elder suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. The area under his feet also quickly dimmed. Then, without waiting for everyone to react, multiple sounds came from the locking heaven formation. Bam, bam, bam. In the blink of an eye, the massive heaven ceiling formation dimmed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Then it completely collapsed. A huge black figure suddenly rushed out of Juyo Tower. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 301. The Locking Heaven Formation Cracked. A few elders and teachers suffered a huge backlash and fell down one after another. Even Yi Jiding took a few steps back. Juyo Tower was already enveloped by endless streams of light, dazzling everyone. However, everyone present only felt endless fear when they saw this scene. Now that the Locking Heaven Formation cracked, they wouldn't be able to continue suppressing the ferocious beasts in Juyo Tower. Uncle Master, what do we do now? Sun Zhongyan asked anxiously. Yi Jiding swallowed the bloody stench in his throat. Quick! Repair the Locking Heaven Formation. Inside Juyo Tower, Chu Luiyue clearly heard the thunder and saw the bolt of lightning harshly striking down from the top of the pagoda. Countless streams of light appeared on the walls in all directions and surged toward the transparent cauldron in the middle. Gradually, a clear image finally appeared in the middle of the transparent cauldron. Screech. Chu Luiyue was shocked. This word, screech. At this moment, the black phantom in the transparent cauldron suddenly let out a sharp screech. The next moment, it flapped its wings and dived toward Chu Luiyue. Dumpling immediately stood in front of Chu Luiyue. A huge wing flapped past. A terrifying airwave came and sent Dumpling flying. Chu Luiyue immediately hugged Dumpling and waved her hand. A transparent barrier instantly appeared in front of them. Boom! That ball of black fire hit the crystal barrier harshly. But this time, the black karmic fire seemed to be much stronger than before. After a moment of stalemate, a crack actually appeared on the crystal barrier. The huge black eagle's eyes were filled with crazy murderous intent, and its sharp claws slapped down harshly. Crack! The colored glass barrier was completely shattered. Chu Luiyue suddenly looked up. The sharp claws were already in front of her. They were about to land and tear her into pieces. She retreated without hesitation and waved her hand at the same time. A ball of red fire suddenly surged out of her palm. Then, it condensed into a huge barrier at a visible speed. Boom! 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 The two balls of flames collided fiercely. Sparks flew everywhere. A terrifying shockwave spread out, and Chu Luiyue was sent flying. With a bang, he hit the wall. Her body trembled, and she felt as if her internal organs were squeezed together. It was about to explode. At the same time, Rong Xiu, who was also in Juyo Tower, had already moved from the 6th level to the 7th level. Looking at the damaged 7th barrier in front of him, Rong Xiu's eyes flashed with a hint of understanding, as if he had already guessed who had done this. The surrounding black karmic fire quickly surged toward the 7th level. However, when they passed by Rong Xiu, they automatically avoided him. Rong Xiu lifted his foot and continued to walk up. However, right at that moment, Several silver rays of light flowed over and began to repair the damaged barrier at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, the barrier was as good as new. Rong Xiu's eyes gradually turned cold, but the corners of his mouth were dyed with a cold smile. "You want to stop me?" No one responded. Only the black karmic fire covered the barrier. It was obvious that they didn't want Rong Xiu to go up to the 7th level. A trace of murderous intent flashed across Rong Xiu's eyes. He raised his hands slightly, and his knuckles were distinct. A terrifying aura rapidly gathered around him. However, just as his hand was about to land on the barrier, he suddenly stopped. He closed his eyes, as if he was listening to something. Then he opened his eyes, and his brows moved slightly. His expression became somewhat playful. Since that's the case, his palm moved slightly, and a rich force quickly surged out. Then, the force quickly condensed outside the barrier, and finally formed silver light pillars that were as thick as an adult's forearm. From the outside, it looked like the door of a cage, completely sealing off the 7th level. His thin, scarlet lips curled up slightly, as if he was waiting to watch a good show. On the 7th level, Chu Luyue slowly rubbed her shoulder. The collision just now had almost broken her shoulder blade. Fortunately, the barrier formed by the crimson flames was able to block the black karmic fire. As she watched the intense battle between the black and red flames, she thought about how to solve the current predicament. She glanced at the transparent cauldron from the corner of her eye. For some reason, she felt that the cauldron seemed to be calling out to her. That feeling was very weak at first, but now it was getting stronger. She couldn't ignore it anymore. This ferocious beast didn't have a physical body, only a soul. For it to be able to survive for 1,000 years, it must have something to do with the pit of heavenly origins under Juyo Tower. She didn't know who exactly suppressed this ferocious beast here, but she could guess from the carvings on the door of Juyo Tower that Juyo Tower was used to seal this ferocious beast. The black karmic fire burned continuously in the transparent cauldron. Then, there was most likely something fishy about the transparent cauldron. Thinking of this, Chu Luyue made up her mind and directly walked toward the cauldron. Sensing Chu Luyue's actions, the black phantom let out a sneer, as if mocking Chu Luyue's stupidity. The cauldron was a sacred item, and it wasn't something Chu Luyue could touch. A stage 2 warrior like her would probably die on the spot before she could even get close. The pair of scarlet eyes stared at Chu Luyue mockingly. It was just thinking about how to devour Chu Luyue, and it didn't expect her to send herself to its doorstep. Chu Luyue walked in front of the cauldron and slammed her palm on the swastika pattern. Digression, Kavinka felt terrible. Let's watch it together tonight. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 302. The Empress hurriedly supported Emperor Jiawen and said with a worried expression, "Your Majesty, you must be careful of your body." Emperor Jiawen's hand tightly grasped the Empress's wrist. With great difficulty, he steadied himself and anxiously looked at the 9 Netherworld Tower. His heart was filled with worry and anger. How could this be? Aren't the other students here? Why is he in the 9 Netherworld Tower? Zhuarong and the others looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Boom. At this moment, the flames above the 9 Netherworld Tower exploded again. It continued to spread upwards. Emperor Jiawen's heart twitched when he saw this. Finally, he could not hold back the anger in his heart and shouted, "His body is not good, and you still let him enter the 9 Netherworld Tower? What are your intentions? If something happens to him, I will definitely not let you off lightly." Emperor Jiawen had always been respectful towards the elders and teachers of the Celestial Foothill Academy. He had never spoken to them with such a tone. So when this shout came out, everyone was taken aback. Only then did they realize that His Majesty was not just worried about King Li. Zhuarong helplessly explained, "Your Majesty, please calm down. This matter was actually His Highness King Li himself entered." Emperor Jiawen was taken aback, his face full of suspicion. How is that possible? Rong Xiu clearly knew that he was ill. How could he take things too hard and enter the 9 Netherworld Tower? We did not dare to deceive your majesty, and could only tell the truth. In fact, before the 9 Netherworld Tower changed, all the students were driven out. Then in the 9 Netherworld Tower, the black karmic fire burned. But it was at that time that His Highness King Li entered the 9 Netherworld Tower. He swallowed hard. Elder Wei Yun and the others tried to stop him, but they could not. It was an extremely simple sentence, but it contained a huge amount of information. Emperor Jiawen took a while to react and asked in disbelief. You mean he went through the fire and entered? Because of shock, his voice trembled a little. Zhuorong and the others could only nod. Yes. In fact, weren't they also full of horror? Rongxiu's action was tantamount to courting death. Later, we also tried to go in, but the fire was too big, there was no way. Zhuorong said and lowered his head. He knew that his explanation sounded weak and feeble, although it was the truth. But they really did not protect Rongxiu. If something really happened to Rongxiu, Emperor Jiawen raised his head and stared blankly at the 9 Netherworld Tower, surrounded by the black karmic fire. His face was pale, and he did not speak for a long time. The Empress stood beside him. Her wrist was unconsciously pinched by him to the point that it hurt. Without looking, she knew that it must be bruised. But she quietly endured it. What was this pain? Hearing the news that Rongxiu was trapped in the 9 Netherworld Tower was enough to offset this pain. If Rongxiu went to such a dangerous place, could he still survive? She was originally worried about how to deal with this thorn in her side, but she did not expect that he would send himself to death. Zhuorong said very clearly that it was Rongxiu himself who wanted to go in. So if he died, no one could be blamed. At least it had nothing to do with her mother and son. The Empress suppressed the joy in her heart, and her pair of willow-shaped eyebrows tightly knitted. She comforted, Your Majesty, don't be anxious. Prince Li has always done things with propriety. There must be a reason for him to do this. Now that Elder Yi is also here, I believe that Prince Li will be safe. At this time, Emperor Jiawen did not listen to a single word. Elder Yi was indeed here. But who could not see that the heaven-sealing array would not last long? Moreover, even the 9 Netherworld Tower was beginning to collapse. Quickly think of a way to save Rongxiu. Emperor Jiawen murmured, and suddenly saw Mu Qinghe's figure from the corner of his eyes. His eyes lit up as if he had seen the last straw. Deputy General Mu. Deputy General Mu. Hearing this, Mu Qinghe looked at Emperor Jiawen. He was naturally aware of the movements on Emperor Jiawen's side. He also knew that Emperor Jiawen wanted to ask him for help. However, he had no intention of making a move. Looking at Mu Qinghe's cold and indifferent expression, Emperor Jiawen felt very apprehensive. But at this juncture, he could not think of any other way and could only plead. Deputy General Mu, your strength is superb, you can definitely. Don't save him. Mu Qinghe straightforwardly interrupted Emperor Jiawen's words, leaving no room for discussion. Emperor Jiawen's face turned even paler. Just when he wanted to continue fighting, Mu Qinghe said again, He is not in any danger now, why should we save him? Inside the Jiyo Tower. Bang! The red demon suffered a blow, and its body flew backward, falling heavily to the ground. The green flames on its body had also become much weaker. Red demon! Chu Luiyue immediately went forward. The red demon struggled to get up, but in the end it still fell down. On its wing, there was a bloody wound. Chu Luiyue carefully picked it up and looked back. In the transparent medicine cauldron, the aura of the phantom formed by the black hellfire had also weakened a lot. The two of them fought fiercely, and actually ended in a draw. Chu Luiyue knew that the red demon had fought with the other party before, and was injured. Therefore, she did not dare to underestimate it in the slightest. However, she did not expect that the red demon would still be evenly matched with the other party when it attacked with all its might. If she really let this thing escape, she really did not know how much trouble it would cause. At this moment, Chu Luiyue saw another stream of light flash past the transparent medicine cauldron. This time, it was much clearer than before. Chu Luiyue could even tell that the stream of light seemed to be following the strange lines on the medicine cauldron. She did not know if it was her imagination. She had a feeling that after the stream of light flashed, The lines on the medicine cauldron seemed to be clearer than before. The red demon lay in Chu Liyue's arms, but it still stared at the medicine cauldron, its eyes filled with indignation. It had already embarrassed itself enough to lose once, but it did not expect to lose the second time. If this were to spread, would its reputation still exist? It moved and wanted to fight again, but it just flapped its wings weakly. Chu Liyue said, "You're injured now, so you'd better behave first." The red demon immediately obediently retracted its wings. But thinking that it would appear very useless after this fight, it could not help but bury its head in a fit of pique. Chu Liyue understood. "You want me to help you get revenge?" Only then did the red demon poke its head out and answer pitifully. Tuanzi glanced at it contemptuously and sneered. It was useless. The red demon immediately glared at it fiercely. Chu Liyue patted its head and smiled helplessly. "All right. Just wait by the side." The red demon then reluctantly left and flew to the side. Before leaving, it did not forget to raise its head at the black hellfire, with an arrogant look, as if it had found a backer. Chu Liyue held her forehead. The red demon did not seem to realize that she was no longer who she used to be. She was really not sure whether she could win or not. Thinking of this, she turned over her palm. With a thought, a crimson flame suddenly rose into the sky, almost at the same time. Above the transparent medicine cauldron, endless flowing light suddenly gushed out. The lines on it quickly became clear. Boom. Digression. I'm going out and will be back very late. So there may not be 5 updates. If there is, it will be very late. You can read it tomorrow. Mobile users, please browse and read. For a better reading experience, please visit the website. Chapter 303. Chu Liyue was shocked. "You're the legendary three-eyed eagle?" It was rumored that this divine beast was born in the far north desert and had the ability to see through heaven and earth. She had never seen a real divine beast in her 2 lives. The reason she knew about the legendary three-eyed eagle was that she had accidentally read about it in the secret history of the Tianling dynasty. She had never thought that she would meet such a divine beast. Although it was just a soul, it was already shocking enough. The legendary three-eyed eagle nodded. After a while, it seemed to be worried that Chu Liyue wouldn't believe it, so it closed its eyes. After a short silence, a vertical pupil suddenly appeared in the middle of its eyes. There was no pupil in that vertical pupil, only a round scarlet eyeball. It looked very strange. Chu Liyue frowned and asked suspiciously, "Isn't the third eye of the legendary three-eyed eagle silver? Why is yours red?" This time, it was the legendary three-eyed eagle's turn to be surprised. "You've seen my race?" Chu Liyue pondered for a moment. "My ancestor has seen it before." The legendary three-eyed eagle looked at Chu Liyue meaningfully and said slowly, "My third eye was indeed silver. My divine eye was indeed silver-white in the past, but it was completely destroyed in the battle 1,000 years ago. It was also because of this that I was trapped here for 1,000 years." Chu Liyue instantly understood. "I see. No wonder someone would spend so much effort to build Juyo Tower. It was because they wanted to suppress a divine beast." When she first found out that there was a divine beast suppressed in the pit of heavenly origins, she was still shocked. However, everything made sense if it was the legendary three-eyed eagle. Other than this level of existence, other divine beasts couldn't possibly survive in the pit of heavenly origins for 1,000 years. Chu Liyue pondered for a moment. "Actually, this heavenly square cauldron is really used to suppress you, right?" An extremely sharp glint flashed across the legendary three-eyed eagle's eyes. Chu Liyue smiled faintly. After a short confrontation, the legendary three-eyed eagle finally said, I forgot that the heavenly square Saint Cauldron is already in your body." In other words, it had already recognized Chu Liyue as its master. Chu Liyue naturally knew everything about it. Not bad. Although there were restrictions on Juyo Tower, they didn't pose a threat to him at all. Even with the existence of the heaven sealing formation, it was unable to truly trap it. If there was only Juyo Tower, it would have escaped long ago. Unfortunately, there was still the heavenly square cauldron. That was the real reason why it had been trapped for 1,000 years. Chu Liyue looked around, but did not see any bones. Then your skeleton. The karmic fire in the heavenly square cauldron is enough to incinerate everything. The legendary three-eyed eagle said coldly. Chu Luiyue was a little confused. Since this thing is so powerful, why hasn't your soul dissipated after being burned for so long? As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Luiyue could feel the hatred in the legendary three-eyed eagle's eyes. He did it on purpose. He did it on purpose. Its voice suddenly became sharp, causing Chu Luiyue to feel a sharp pain in his ears. He? Who is he? The person who suppressed the legendary three-eyed eagle here? What on purpose? Chu Luiyue asked instinctively. These words seemed to evoke the painful past of the legendary three-eyed eagle. It let out a shrill cry, filled with endless resentment and grief. He suppressed me in Juyo Tower, burned me with the karmic fire in the heavenly square cauldron, and nourished me with the force of the pit of heavenly origins. He made me suffer between life and death, generation after generation, never to be reincarnated. Chu Luiyue's heart trembled slightly. So that's how it is. So that's how it is. This way, the legendary three-eyed eagle could suffer this terrifying punishment day and night, and it could never escape death. Death would be the end of it. But the most terrifying thing was that it would be worse than death. Who knew what kind of grudge that person had with the legendary three-eyed eagle? However, from the way he punished it, he was indeed a ruthless person. Chu Luiyue couldn't help but recall all the rumors about Tianlu Academy in her mind. However, after thinking about it, she realized that she knew very little about the founder of Tianlu Academy, who was also the first dean. She didn't even know that person's name. In fact, she wasn't the only one. The others didn't seem to be familiar with him either. Tianlu Academy was an extremely special existence in country Yaochun. Everyone knew that it was a top-notch academy for cultivators, but very few people knew about Tianlu Academy's earliest history. So you've been trying to get out of here all this time? Chu Luiyue asked softly. The legendary three-eyed eagle sneered. That's right. He thought that he was smart and found a balance between the two. He thought that he could make me suffer for eternity. However, he didn't expect that water would penetrate a stone. 1,000 years was really too long. Even it didn't know how it had endured day by day. When it was suppressed at the beginning, it was in so much pain that it wanted to die. However, to it even death was a luxury. Later, it discovered that it could devour the force in the pit of heavenly origins. It contained violent and ferocious impurities. An ordinary fiend might have already exploded and died. However, it was a divine beast, and the karmic fire in the heavenly square cauldron happened to be able to refine it. Over time, it would be able to silently absorb energy from it and gradually become stronger. Until today, it could finally take a gamble. It had seen the locking heaven formation 1,000 years ago, and knew how to break it long ago. Chu Luiyue suddenly asked, "Why did you do that? Then, why did you target me when I entered Juyo Tower?" The legendary three-eyed eagle fell silent. After a while, it said in a gloomy voice, "Because there's an extremely powerful force in your body. I want to obtain this power, which is why I attacked you." Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes. Was it referring to the water droplet in her dantian? You're indeed different from ordinary people, aren't you? Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to reach the 7th level. Chu Luiyue glanced at Dumpling. She was different from ordinary people, and Dumpling was also very different from ordinary fiends. Now, since you're the owner of the heavenly square cauldron, I won't be your enemy. Chu Luiyue didn't comment. Right now, everyone outside must be on high alert. The academy's elders and teachers want to suppress you again. If I let you go, how should I deal with this situation? The legendary three-eyed eagle fell silent. Moreover, you're in a soul state now. Even if I let you go, how far can you escape? Without the force in the pit of heavenly origins, how long can you survive? Chu Luiyue asked lightly. A hint of struggle flashed across the legendary three-eyed eagle's eyes. After a long while, it suddenly raised its head and looked at Chu Luiyue. As long as you agree to extinguish the karmic fire in the heavenly square cauldron, I'm willing to follow you. Chapter 304. Oh, Really? Chu Luyue seemed to be a little tempted. Of course. Although I don't have a physical body now, I still have my strength. If I were to follow you, I would be considered as your right-hand man. As the legendary three-eyed eagle spoke, its cold gaze swept across Dumpling and Hong Yao. Although it didn't say anything, its meaning was already very obvious. As a mythical beast, it was the strongest existence here. Not to mention country Yao Chun, even in the entire Black Tortoise continent, mythical beasts were existences that could look down on the world. Dumpling instantly exploded and bared its teeth. What kind of gaze is that? Isn't it just a mythical beast? What's so great about it? It doesn't even have a physical body. It's far worse than the others. Hong Yao rolled its eyes and flew to Chu Luyue's shoulder. It didn't seem to intend to get involved in this matter, and just seriously combed its feathers. Then, a feather with faint bloodstains fell, seemingly unintentionally floating in front of Chu Luyue's eyes. Hong Yao was stunned, and then leaned on Chu Luyue's neck aggrievedly, its eyes filled with tears. Although it didn't say anything, this series of actions was silently accusing the legendary three-eyed eagle of its previous atrocities. Chu Luyue smiled helplessly and touched its wings. All right, I know you're in pain. Look at its current situation. It's much worse than you. You've taken your revenge, right? Hong Yao turned its head and sobbed even harder. Chu Luyue was speechless. Why do I feel that Hong Yao's personality is even more delicate than before? Hong Yao, if your master sees this scene. Hong Yao's body stiffened. Mu Qinghe's heart had always been cold. No matter how much Hong Yao acted coquettishly, angry and pitiful, it was useless against Mu Qinghe. It was also because it was now beside Chu Luyue that it was so unscrupulous. If you feel too free, I can send you back at any time. Hearing this, Red Demon finally recognized the situation in front of it and stayed aside obediently. That mythological beast wasn't that powerful either. Previously, it was pretending to be a big-tailed wolf. Now wasn't it submitting to Chu Luyue? Even if it had to follow Chu Luyue in the end, it would be ranked behind it. At that time, it would be a good opportunity to teach it the rules of first come, first served. Thinking of this, Red Demon was finally in a good mood. It flapped its wings with satisfaction. Chu Luyue looked at the legendary three-eyed eagle. With the help of a divine beast, who wouldn't be tempted? Even she felt the same way. Now that she was alone and weak, if she could really have the help of such a powerful divine beast, it would definitely be a lot more convenient. The eyes of the legendary three-eyed eagle flickered. So I don't agree. Chu Luyue smiled and rejected the suggestion of the legendary three-eyed eagle. I can let you stay in the heavenly square cauldron and take you out. This way, no one will find out that you're hiding on my body, and you'll be able to escape. However, I will not extinguish the hellfire in the heavenly square cauldron. Of course, I will provide you with nutrients. Although the water droplet in my dantian is not the pit of heavenly origins, it contains abundant energy. As long as you want, I can give you a portion of it at regular intervals to ensure that you can continue to maintain your current strength, or even become stronger. Agree or disagree, you can choose now. Chu Luyue wasn't stupid. The legendary three-eyed eagle was a divine beast. Although it didn't have a physical body, its remnant soul obviously couldn't be underestimated. At least, it wasn't something that a mere stage 2 warrior like her could control. If she really let the legendary three-eyed eagle escape, its first target might be her. The only thing that could restrain it was the hellfire in the heavenly square cauldron. How could she agree to extinguish the hellfire? The legendary three-eyed eagle stared at Chu Luyue. The human race is as cunning as always. No, you're worse than him. Back then, that person had a blood feud with it, so he thought of such a cruel way to torture it. Although it was full of resentment, it had to accept it. But now, what about Chu Luyue? She actually wanted to take advantage of the fact that she had become the owner of the heavenly square cauldron to control and make use of it. You're not helping me at all. You're just making use of me. Chu Luyue's smile deepened as she admitted frankly. Yes, in her previous life, she trusted too easily and ended up in a miserable state. Facing a legendary three-eyed eagle that had been trapped for 1,000 years, She naturally had to be more vigilant. So do you agree or not? If you feel humiliated, it's fine. For the sake of this heavenly square cauldron, I can give you a quick death. Chu Luyue said very generously. The legendary three-eyed eagle fell into silence and didn't speak for a long time. Chu Luyue shrugged. Since that's the case, don't blame me. Fine, I'll grant you that. The legendary three-eyed eagle suddenly shouted. Chu Luyue smiled until her eyes turned into crescents. Wouldn't it have been better if you had agreed earlier? You've wasted so much time. The legendary three-eyed eagle felt that if it still had its physical body, it would probably vomit blood because of Chu Luyue. Chu Luyue closed her eyes and held her breath. The floating water droplets suddenly fell into the last cluster of black karmic fire in the heavenly square cauldron. Ah! The legendary three-eyed eagle let out a shrill cry. What are you doing? Chu Luyue smiled faintly. You said earlier that you and the heavenly square cauldron had been interdependent for 1,000 years. I thought that the karmic fire should already contain your power, right? If I don't check it properly, I'm afraid I won't even know how I died. As she spoke, Chu Luyue checked the last cluster of karmic fire. There seemed to be something burning fiercely in the black karmic fire, letting out a strange sizzling sound. The cries of the legendary three-eyed eagle were mixed in. Chu Luyue turned a deaf ear. Soon the karmic fire, which was originally pure black, gradually changed color. Chu Luyue's eyes narrowed, as expected. The karmic fire was indeed mixed with too much of the legendary three-eyed eagle's power. Just now, it pretended to be deeply hurt and begged Chu Luyue to extinguish the karmic fire. But in fact, it was to provoke Chu Luyue to leave the karmic fire. This was the most convenient way for it. However, it didn't expect Chu Luyue to see through its plan. Gradually, the sound of its screeching grew weaker. The black color of the cluster of karmic fire also gradually faded. When the last trace of impurities was removed, the last cluster of karmic fire had become completely transparent and had completely merged with the originally transparent heavenly square cauldron. Only the flickering swastika character could be clearly seen. The legendary three-eyed eagle's translucent soul was also in it, and it had completely fainted because of its weakness. Chu Luyue opened his eyes and looked at his palm. A faint swastika character was faintly discernible. Then she looked at her surroundings. It was empty. Boom! A huge rock suddenly fell from the top of her head. She was shocked. Juyo Tower was really going to collapse. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 305. She turned around to leave. Dumpling Hongyao, let's go. The heavenly square cauldron had become hers, and the legendary three-eyed eagle was in her hands. Juyo Tower could no longer support itself. Bang! Boom! Bam! More and more rocks fell and smashed onto the ground. Smoke and dust rose everywhere. Chu Luyue quickly rushed to the stairs of the 7th floor, wanting to go down. However, he suddenly realized that the barrier that had been bitten by Tuanzi had already been restored to its original state. Moreover, there seemed to be a cage outside the barrier. Chu Luyue frowned. Suddenly, the cage outside disappeared silently. A familiar tall figure gradually appeared. A thought flashed across Chu Luyue's mind. Could it be? The next moment, the person opposite her seemed to reach out and gently tapped on the barrier. The barrier silently split from the middle. A cold and devilish face appeared in front of her. Chu Luyue opened her mouth. Rongxiu, why are you here? Rongxiu's eyes were deep. Suddenly he pulled her into his arms. Boom! An entire wall suddenly collapsed and smashed onto the spot where Chu Luyue was standing just now. Chu Luyue leaned against Rongxiu's arms and looked back. The originally empty 7th floor was in a mess, and the ground was filled with rocks. She gently exhaled. Although she could avoid this level of danger, she felt more at ease with Rongxiu here. She remembered that Rongxiu wasn't around when she came in. This meant that he came in after her. You came in after Juyo Tower changed? Chu Luyue asked softly. Rongxiu grunted and hugged her even tighter. Chu Luyue looked up at him. Elder Wei Yin didn't stop you? As the person guarding Juyo Tower, Elder Wei Yin would definitely sense that something was wrong with Juyo Tower immediately. Logically speaking, he would never allow Rong Xiao to enter like this. Rong Xiao looked at the worry in her clear and bright eyes, and his lips curved up. Of course I did. He didn't manage to stop her. Are you worried? Of course, Chu Luiyue was worried. Juyo Tower was so dangerous, and Rong Xiao had barged in just like that. Elder Wei Yin and the rest would definitely be suspicious. Previously he had been hiding it well. If something was exposed because of this, don't worry. Rong Xiao lowered his head and kissed her soft lips. The cool and soft touch made Chu Luiyue's heart empty. Rong Xiao's indistinct syllables came from between his lips and teeth. You just have to put on a show with me. Chu Luiyue was stunned. What? Rong Xiao chuckled and bit her lips gently. Chu Luiyue opened her mouth instinctively. Rong Xiao attacked her and hugged her for a while before he stopped before he lost control. Chu Luiyue's eyes were watery from his kiss. Rong Xiao glanced at her. Then his gaze landed on her red and full lips. His eyes darkened. It was a pity that Juyo Tower was about to collapse. Otherwise, they could have stayed here for a while longer. Although he had already considered that he would have to go out and meet those people later, and didn't dare to go overboard, he still couldn't control himself, and kissed her until her lips were slightly red and swollen. He held Chu Luiyue's face and pressed his thumb against her lips gently. A good show. Chu Luiyue looked at him in confusion. The next moment, Rong Xiao suddenly let go of her. He walked to the side and casually picked up a stone. Chu Luiyue suddenly had a strange premonition. Rip. With a calm expression, Rong Xiao used the sharp edges of the stone to harshly cut his arm. His snow-white clothes were instantly torn apart. A wound so deep that his bones could be seen immediately appeared on his arm. Fresh blood spurted out and quickly dyed his clothes red. Rong Xiao. Chu Luiyue immediately went forward, grabbed his wrist, and asked anxiously, "What are you doing?" Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly and moved closer to her ear. His voice was low and pleasant. "Beauty, you risked your life to save me. I have nothing to repay you with. I can only repay you with my body." Chu Luiyue widened her eyes slightly. "You." Rong Xiao actually planned to rip. Rong Xiao made another cut on his hand. Chu Luiyue's heart was throbbing painfully. She pressed his hand down. "Rong Xiao, you don't have to do this. You really don't have to do this. There are many reasons. You can just think of one. You don't have to. But that's not as convincing as this." Rong Xiao smiled faintly. "That would be troublesome. This is better. And I don't want to wait any longer." There was no better reason than this to let the two of them be together. Opportunities were hard to come by. What was such a small injury to him? Chu Luiyue's heart trembled violently. For some reason, the tip of her nose suddenly felt a little sore. Rong Xiao kissed her eyes. "If you don't want to look, then don't look. We'll be out soon." Chu Luiyue shook her head. "No. It's not that I don't want to look. I just..." She paused, then said in a low voice, "I can't bear to." Although her voice was low, it was incomparably firm. Rong Xiao was stunned. Then, the corners of his eyes and the tips of his brows were tinged with a smile. "With your words, even if I'm covered in bruises, it's still worth it." With that, he raised his hand again and made another cut on his body. Boom! Juyo Tower collapsed even more. Rong Xiao pulled Chu Luiyue into his arms. Stones rolled down. Chu Luiyue leaned tightly against Rong Xiao's chest. Her entire body was protected in his arms, and she couldn't see anything. However, she could clearly hear the sound of everything collapsing around her. And those stones fell on Rong Xiao's body with dull thuds. One and another. Chu Luiyue's heart also seemed to have been hit hard by something. Chapter 306. Hong Long Long. Juyo Tower suddenly collapsed. Despair was written all over everyone's faces. Juyo Tower had been in Tianlu Academy for thousands of years, and they had always been proud of it. Nobody would have thought that it would be destroyed in such a way. The most important thing was that there was a terrifying ferocious beast inside. Sun Zhongyan looked at Yi Zhiding nervously. "Uncle Master, the locking heaven formation has been broken, and Juyo Tower has completely collapsed." What should we do next? Yi Jiding knitted his brows and stared at the ruins. That's not right. Sun Zhongyan was dazed. What's not right? Since all the restrictions have been broken, that beast should have rushed out. Why hasn't there been any movement yet? Upon hearing this, Sun Zhongyan immediately realized something. You're saying? Yi Jiding shook his head and walked forward. Uncle Master. Sun Zhongyan immediately stopped him. It's dangerous. Yi Jiding waved the bloodstained fan in his hand and chuckled. No matter what, I'm still the director. How can I not go and take a look when such a big thing has happened? He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that the ferocious beast's aura seemed to have disappeared. He didn't notice when he had this feeling, but at this point, he really couldn't sense any danger from the ruins. Sun Zhongyan hurriedly said, I'll go with you. The two of them went forward together. Emperor Jiawen looked at this scene dejectedly, as if all his energy had been sucked out. Juyo Tower was already in danger when it was surrounded by the black fire. Now Juyo Tower had completely collapsed into ruins. Rongxiu, I'm afraid. The Empress held his arm and softly consoled him. Your Majesty, my condolences. What nonsense are you saying? Emperor Jiawen was agitated by the words, and he pushed her harshly. The Empress didn't notice, and her body fell to the ground uncontrollably. I want to see him if he's alive. And I want to see his corpse if he's dead. Everything isn't clear yet. Who allowed you to curse him to die? Hollered Emperor Jiawen as his face flushed red, and his veins popped out. The surroundings instantly quietened down. Countless pairs of eyes landed on the Empress. The Empress felt like there was a blade on her back, and she was embarrassed. As the Empress, she had always been high and mighty. When had she ever suffered such humiliation? Although His Majesty did not dote on her much, he had always been very respectful. He had never laid a hand on her, and even rarely reprimanded her. But now, in front of all these people, she had lost all her face. Your Highness. Eunuch Min hurriedly stepped forward. Nyang Nyang, are you all right? As he spoke, he didn't forget to reprimand the person beside him. Are you all blind? What are you waiting for? The palace servants, who were shocked on the spot, finally reacted. They hurriedly went forward and helped the Empress up in a flurry. The Empress Phoenix hairpin was already a little crooked, and there was a lot of dust on her exquisite and luxurious palace dress. She looked very disheveled. The palace servants only took a glance and quickly lowered their heads, not daring to say anything. The Empress took a deep breath, pushed them away, and forced a smile. I'm fine. His Majesty was worried about Prince Li and was anxious. Go. Find it for me. Even if he had to dig 3 feet into the ground, he had to find it. Emperor Jiawen didn't seem to notice what was happening here, as he only cared about Rongxiu. He hollered at the people below. The Empress choked on her words and her face burned. This was equivalent to 2 tight slaps on her face. The surrounding gazes were like sharp knives that almost pierced through her. She wanted to leave immediately, but she clearly couldn't. She took a deep breath in and suppressed all her emotions. She tidied her phoenix hairpin and bowed to Emperor Jiawen. Your Majesty, please forgive me. I misspoke. Actually, I'm very worried about Prince Li. Emperor Jiawen coldly glanced at her, as if he had seen through everything. The Empress's heart skipped a beat, and she couldn't say the rest of her words. She guiltily turned away. Emperor Jiawen chuckled in his heart. The Empress looked dignified and magnanimous, but that wasn't the case in reality. She didn't like that person back then, so she naturally wouldn't like her son now. If something really happened to Rongxiu, she would be happier than anyone else. In the past, he just turned a blind eye to it, but he couldn't be bothered to deal with her now. On the other side, Chu Ning had already rushed over with his men. He directly walked in a certain direction. His footsteps were hurried, and his expression was tense. The compass shows that Yuer is here, so she should be fine. Chu Ning walked to a certain spot and wanted to move a rock away. However, he quickly realized that the problem was more serious than he thought. The material used to build Juyo Tower was very special. It was just a rock that was half a person's height, but it weighed almost a ton. He was a stage 5 warrior, and he was considered a top warrior in the entire country Yaochen. However, even for him, it was not an easy task to clear all the rocks here. When the imperial guards saw Chu Ning's reaction, they hurriedly followed him. Lord, did you discover something? Chu Ning shook his head and didn't say anything. But he didn't stop moving. The crowd looked at each other. They had also heard from Tianlu Academy's people that Lord Chu Ning's only daughter, Chu Luyue, was also trapped inside. She was most likely dead. Go over there and move all the rocks away. Chu Ning ordered. The subordinates dispersed. Chu Ning dug with all his might, and a few cuts appeared on his hands, which were dripping with blood. However, he didn't seem to be affected as he stubbornly cleared the rocks away. Everyone had different expressions when they saw this scene. What's wrong with Lord Chu Ning? Although His Majesty asked us to find someone, isn't he a little too stubborn? Could it be that he really intends to dig up this pile of ruins? Sure. Don't you know that Chu Luyue is also inside? Ah, I see. Then isn't she also? What a pity. Lord Chu Ning has been through a lot all these years. Now that he finally made it, something like this happened. Chu Ning turned a deaf ear to everyone's discussion. Then he realized that there were a few more people beside him. He looked up and saw a few familiar young faces. Hongyu. It was Mu Hongyu, Sun Hu and Gu Mingfeng. Mu Hongyu's eyes were red, but she looked very determined. Uncle, we're here to help you. Chu Ning's heart warmed as he nodded. Help me here. The few of them immediately took action. Even Zhuorong and the rest couldn't bear to see this scene. Lord Chu Ning, we know that you're very worried about Lu Yu, but none of us wanted this to happen. Sheath screech. A crisp cry suddenly came from the ruins. Then, a few rocks that were piled up together were suddenly blown away by a ball of green flames. A green sparrow flew out quickly. Two figures appeared in front of everyone. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 307. You're princely. Everyone was shocked when they saw the two of them. Who else could it be but Chu Luyue and Rong Xiu, who were previously trapped in Juyo Tower? Chu Ning immediately walked over with big strides. Are you okay? He asked nervously as he sized up Chu Luyue. When he saw that Chu Luyue's body was covered in blood and dust, his heart skipped a beat. You're injured? Chu Luyue's lips were dry and white as he weakly shook his head. No, it's mainly because His Highness. Chu Ning then saw that Chu Luyue was supporting Rong Xiu, and his situation seemed to be even worse. His face was as pale as a sheet, and he was barely breathing, as if he would faint at any moment. There were many wounds on his body, and some were so deep that his bones could be seen. What happened to His Highness? 7. Emperor Jiawen was surprised when he saw Rong Xiu come out, and he hurriedly walked over. But when he saw Rong Xiu covered in wounds, the joy on his face immediately disappeared, and it was replaced by deep shock and worry. 7. What happened to you? Zhuorong. Elder son. Come and take a look. Zhuorong was originally at the side, and he immediately went forward when he heard this. Sun Zhongyan, Elder Yi, and the rest, who were planning to enter the ruins, also rushed over when they heard the commotion. Ever since the Empress saw Chu Luyue and Rong Xiu appear, she stood rooted to the ground and didn't recover her senses for a long time. The two of them actually didn't die. Juyo Tower caused such a huge commotion. First it burned, and then it completely collapsed. Just how lucky were they to be able to come out alive? But when she saw that Emperor Jiawen had already walked over, she clenched her teeth and could only follow. Zhuorong helped Rong Xiu take his pulse. Emperor Jiawen asked, "How are you? How is it?" Zhuorong frowned and thought for a moment. Don't worry too much, Your Majesty. Most of His Highness' injuries are just superficial wounds. As long as he recuperates well, he will recover very quickly. The rock in Emperor Jiawen's heart was finally put down. That's good, that's good. Although he was injured, he was still alive. This was much better than what he had expected. Zhuorong said hesitantly. But what? Emperor Jiawen was dazed. But His Highness's body has always been weak. Previously it was not easy to nurse him back to health. This time, I'm afraid he will have to recuperate again. Disappointment filled Emperor Jiawen's eyes. Rong Xiu had been ill since he was a child. Now that he finally got better, he didn't expect it. Forget it, let's talk about this later. The most important thing now is to heal old Seven's injuries. Rong Xiao forced a smile on his pale lips and said in a low voice, Imperial Father. Emperor Jiawen hurriedly said, Yes. You rest first. If you have anything to say it later. At this moment, Yi Zhiding and Sun Zhongyan had already walked over. Girl, how are you? The first person that Yi Zhiding saw was his precious disciple. Chu Luiyue hurriedly said, Master, I'm fine. Master, I'm fine. You should take a look at His Highness Prince Li first. Even though she looked disheveled, Yi Zhiding saw that her voice was filled with energy, and he felt much more at ease. That's good. That's good. Even though he really wanted to take Chu Luiyue's pulse, on second thought, his precious disciple might be better than him in this aspect. Thus he decided to give up. She always knew what to do. Hence, he turned his gaze to Rong Xiao. He stepped forward and asked Zhuorong, How's his condition? How's he? Zhuorong gave a simple explanation. As Yi Zhiding listened, he took Rong Xiao's pulse again. Everyone present knew that Yi Zhiding was the most capable celestial physician here. So nobody felt that it was unnecessary for him to take Rong Xiao's pulse a second time. Instead, they felt much more at ease. After a moment of silence, Yi Zhiding nodded and took out a pill to feed Rong Xiao. Your Highness's body is fine. I'll help you stop the bleeding first, and I'll treat your wounds when we go back. In less than half a month, your external injuries will be healed. However, your internal injuries. Old Seven still has internal injuries. Emperor Jiawen couldn't help but interrupt. Yi Zhiding looked at him, as if it was natural. Of course, the injuries on his body were obviously caused by the falling rubble. Juyo Tower's rocks are very heavy, so it's normal for them to cause internal injuries. However, it's fine. The pill that I gave you earlier can improve your blood circulation and heal your internal injuries. He might need a month to fully recover. But Your Majesty, you don't have to be overly worried. Emperor Jiawen was both happy and worried. He knew that this was the best outcome, so he could only nod. Thank you, Elder Yi. Yi Zhiding softly said a few more words to Zhuorong. Zhuorong wiped the sweat off his forehead in embarrassment. Thank you for your advice, Director. He was too anxious just now, and he wasn't very proficient in this area. Hence, he didn't realize that something had happened to Rong Xiao's internal injuries. Luckily, Emperor Jiawen's heart was on Rong Xiao, so he didn't pay attention to this point. Old Seven, you can't do this again in the future. Juyo Tower is so dangerous. How can you go there? Said Emperor Jiawen softly. It seemed like a reprimand, but everyone could hear the worry in his words. After today's incident, everyone in the imperial city would know how much His Majesty cared about Prince Li. Even the Crown Prince might not receive such treatment. Some people gathered together and whispered to each other. I've long heard that His Majesty favors Prince Li a lot. If not, he wouldn't have conferred him the title of prince the moment he came back. It seems like it's true now. All these years, have you seen His Majesty care so much about any prince or princess? Even the arrogant and despotic fourth princess wasn't like this, right? The fourth princess has already become a good-for-nothing. How can she be compared? On the other hand, haven't you heard that the Crown Prince angered His Majesty a while ago, and he was put under house arrest in Crown Prince Mansion for a long time? He even took back some of his privileges. Is His Majesty biased? Shh. Lower your voice. Can't you see that His Majesty and the Empress are still here? I don't think so. Think about it. Even if His Majesty really dotes on Prince Li the most, how can a sickly person take on such a big responsibility? That's true. However, if Prince Li's body is better, he might really become a formidable opponent for the Crown Prince. The Empress could only hear bits and pieces of the soft discussions. However, this was enough to make her feel very aggrieved. She forcefully suppressed the tumultuous emotions in her heart and looked at Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao. Prince Li, I heard that you went in after Juyo Tower burned? It was so dangerous then. Why did you go in? Her voice was gentle, and there was a faint smile on her lips. However, her eyes were cold. I heard that only Ms. Chu was inside at that time. Your Highness, you didn't get injured because you wanted to save her, did you? Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Chapter 308. The Empress gently said this sentence, but it was like a poisonous snake spitting out its tongue. It was filled with evil intentions. Once she confirmed that this was the case, it wasn't a good thing for Rong Xiu and Chu Luyue. In that case, Rong Xiu would become an infatuated man who would do anything for a woman in the eyes of the public, and Chu Luyue would be called a troublemaker. No matter how much Emperor Jiawen favored Rong Xiu, he couldn't hand his career to such a person. At least, the officials in the imperial court wouldn't agree. Needless to say, Chu Luyue, the royal family had always avoided such women like snakes and scorpions. As expected, the moment she said that, Emperor Jiawen's expression froze. The situation was too tense just now, so he didn't have time to think about this. Now that the Empress mentioned it, he also felt that something was amiss. Rong Xiu Luyu, is what the Empress said true? He sized the two of them up suspiciously. Thinking back, the two of them did come out together. Did Rong Xiu really go in for Chu Luyue? Perhaps it was because he had taken Yi Jiding's pill. But Rong Xiu's complexion looked better now. His pale lips moved slightly, and a faint smile appeared on his face. Father, that's not the case. I went in for another reason. I just happened to meet Miss Chu in the middle, so we came out together. The Empress sneered in her heart, but she didn't show it on her face. Oh, so it's just a coincidence. But why are your injuries so serious, Princely? On the other hand, Miss Chu doesn't seem to have any major injuries. People who don't know would think that you were injured because you wanted to save her. As she spoke, she glanced at Emperor Jiawen and sighed. Luckily, Princely is blessed by the heavens. If not, I don't know how sad your majesty would be. Don't you think so, your majesty? Emperor Jiawen's gaze swept past Chu Luyue with a hint of scrutiny. The Empress's words made sense. Anyone who saw the situation between the two would find it strange. Speaking of which, Princely and Miss Chu are really fated to meet. At the Crown Prince's birthday banquet, Princely seemed to take special care of Miss Chu. Emperor Jiawen knitted his brows slightly. That was right. He also remembered this matter. Even though it was just a small matter, it was indeed a little strange now that he thought about it. The Empress lowered her voice and suddenly smiled. Your Majesty, please don't take it to heart. I was just speaking casually. Princely had not been in the capital for many years, so he should not have been familiar with Miss Chu before. These were just groundless guesses. Moreover, if Princely really liked Miss Chu, it would make a good story. But Emperor Jiawen didn't look happy at all. Rong Xiu smiled gently. Imperial Father, I actually have to thank Miss Chu for today. If she hadn't saved me in time, I'm afraid I would have died in Juyo Tower. Everyone was stunned. Emperor Jiawen couldn't help but ask. You said that Lu Yu saved you. Exactly. At that time, cough cough. Rong Xiu clenched his fists and coughed a few times on his lips. When Juyo Tower started to collapse, I was coincidentally trapped on the 6th floor. The injuries on my body were caused at that time. Back then, the 6th floor was sealed by the collapsed rocks. I tried my best to get out, but I couldn't. Coincidentally, I met Miss Chu at that time. She helped me and brought me out without caring about the danger. Only then could I see the light of day again. If not, Rong Xiu didn't continue speaking, but his meaning was clear. Emperor Jiawen's expression became much gentler. So you weren't injured because of her. Instead, she saved you? Rong Xiu lightly nodded. Imperial Father is wise. Emperor Jiawen then heaved a sigh of relief. The way he looked at Chu Luyue was also very different from before. I see. Luyu, it seems like I still have to thank you this time. Rong Xiu hasn't been by my side for so many years. Now that he's finally recovered, he's finally back in the Imperial City. If something really happens, how am I going to explain it to Wan Er? His voice suddenly paused, and pain flashed across his face. The Empress looked down, and hid the jealousy in her eyes. Then, she seemingly smiled and said, Oh, I see. So that's how it is. This consort really made a mistake. I didn't expect Miss Chu to be able to save Princely from such a dangerous place despite her slender body. She's really amazing. Chu Luiyue raised her brows slightly. It seems like the Empress isn't willing to give up. Rongxiu has already said so much, yet she still wants to drag me down. It's a pity that such small tricks don't work on me. Rongxiu lightly smiled. Miss Chu took first place in both the warrior and Xian master categories in the Qing Jiao competition. I've been sick for a long time, so I naturally can't be compared to her in this aspect. The Empress was stumped. I actually forgot about this. Although Chu Luiyue looks slender, she's very capable. Chu Luiyue bent her knees and bowed humbly. You flatter me, Your Majesty. Although Lu Yu's insignificant skills don't catch your eye, it's my honor to be able to help Prince Li. The Empress was speechless. If Chu Luiyue's skills are considered insignificant skills, then what are the people who lost to her in the Qing Jiao competition? What? Girl, you actually took first place in the Qing Jiao competition? Yi Jiding suddenly spoke with a shocked expression. After he came out of seclusion, he had been busy dealing with Juyou Tower, and didn't have time to find out about other things. Sun Zhongyan chuckled. Uncle Master, I almost forgot to tell you about this. Lu Yu indeed took first place twice. Yi Jiding widened his eyes, and only reacted after a while. Then, what about the celestial physician? Chu Luiyue said honestly, Master, I didn't tell you anything. I didn't sign up for the Xian Master competition. Ha! Yi Jiding was instantly disappointed. Although he knew that Chu Luiyue might not be interested in the celestial physician competition at the Qing Jiao competition, given her standards, she was still his old man's disciple. She took first place twice, but it had nothing to do with the celestial physician. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't disappointed. Sun Zhongyan held back his laughter and said, Uncle Master, although Lu Yu didn't sign up for the competition, the pill that won first place was refined by Lu Yu. Yi Jiding was confused. Sun Zhongyan briefly explained the situation. So, from a certain perspective, Lu Yu can be considered to have taken first place in all three competitions. Sun Zhongyan sighed and looked at the Empress meaningfully. Also, Vice Admiral Mu of the Tianling dynasty has already chosen Lu Yu and thinks highly of her. The Empress's body swayed. She didn't like the person that Mu Qinghe liked. Wasn't she just making things difficult for herself? I'm not. The Empress was extremely nervous. She wanted to explain, but she realized that it would only be disadvantageous to her if she continued to harp on this issue. She suddenly thought of something and asked, Oh, that's right. There seems to be a restriction on every level of Juyou Tower. Prince Li's body is weak, so how did he reach the 6th level? Chapter 309. Once she said that, the surroundings fell silent. Even Sun Zhongyan and the rest couldn't help but look at Rongxiu. Actually, this was what they were most curious about. Back then, even Wei Yin was stopped outside, but Rongxiu successfully barged in and went all the way to the 6th floor. One had to know that even Sun Zhongyan and the rest had only reached the 5th floor at most. The Empress stared closely at Rongxiu, and many guesses flashed across her mind. Ever since Rongxiu came back, he had been living in seclusion. Other than recuperating, he rarely interfered with other matters. He seemed to have no desires and was gentle and calm. However, she felt that something was amiss. She couldn't pinpoint exactly what the problem was, but she had a feeling that Rongxiu wasn't as simple and harmless as he looked on the surface. If he was really a sickly and weak person, how did he enter Juyou Tower and go up to the 6th floor? Countless gazes landed on Rongxiu, and they were scrutinizing him. Rongxiu looked calm as he smiled. However, that smile didn't extend to the corners of his eyes. The reason why I can go up to the 6th floor is that my mother went up before. Emperor Jiawen was stunned. What did you say? Rongxiu took out something from his arms. It was a palm-sized ring-shaped jade pendant. It was entirely green in color, and looked like a leaf that sprouted at the beginning of spring. It was clear and clean. There was a pattern engraved on the jade pendant. Chu Luiyue glanced at it from the corner of his eyes, and realized that it seemed to be a peach blossom pattern. This was clearly a jade pendant carved from high-quality jade. But other than that, There didn't seem to be anything special about it. However, Emperor Jiawen's expression changed when he saw the jade pendant. He hurriedly walked forward as if he wanted to take a closer look at the jade pendant, but his hand suddenly stopped halfway. Chu Luyue had never seen such an expression on Emperor Jiawen's face. Complicated, tangled longing, regret. She glanced at the Empress, who was standing behind Emperor Jiawen, and her face turned ghastly pale, as if she had seen something terrifying. With a thought, she roughly guessed the origin of the jade pendant. Where did you get this jade pendant?" asked Emperor Jiawen with a trembling voice. "The 6th floor," Rongxiu said calmly. "When I saw that Juyo Tower was on fire, I remembered that the item was still on the 6th level. I was worried, so I went up despite being stopped. Although I was injured, fortunately, I got it back in one piece. This was the first gift she personally gave me back then. After she left the palace, she took it with her. I have been looking for this thing for many years, but I didn't expect." Emperor Jiawen's heart seemed to be blocked by something, and he didn't say anything for a long time. Chu Luyue understood. It turns out that it's Emperor Jiawen and Consort Wan's love token. No wonder Emperor Jiawen had such a strong reaction. Looking at him, he does have deep feelings for Consort Wan. Rumor has it that Consort Wan was the most favored in the harem back then, but for some reason, she fell out with Emperor Jiawen and left the palace in a fit of anger to become a teacher at Tianlu Academy. She didn't return to the palace until she died. I wonder what happened back then that made Consort Wan take back all the love tokens that she gave out. It seems like she didn't leave any hope for Emperor Jiawen. Now it seems like Emperor Jiawen values Rongxiu so much because of Consort Wan. Upon seeing Emperor Jiawen's emotional state, Rongxiu still had a gentle smile on his face. But to Chu Luyue, this smile was clearly distant. It was obvious that Rongxiu didn't care about Emperor Jiawen's series of reactions. Before Mother left back then, she told me that she had placed this item on the 6th floor of Juyo Tower. She also reminded me not to tell you unless I had no choice. So please forgive me, Father. Emperor Jiawen was dazed. As expected, she still hates me. You're doing this for her own good, so it's only right that you don't tell me. Since this item is already with you, you can keep it safe from now on. Then, Emperor Jiawen sighed as if he had aged a lot in an instant. We are tired. We will return to the palace first. After he finished speaking, he turned around and left without waiting for the others to say anything. The Empress was stunned and at a loss. Gone. His Majesty left just like that. Wasn't he asking Rongxiu how he got to the 6th floor? Rongxiu only mentioned the jade pendant, and he actually stopped asking? The Empress turned around and glanced at Emperor Jiawen, who had already left. Her rationality told her that she should immediately follow him. However, too many things had happened today, and she could no longer control the impulse in her heart. Therefore, she persisted in asking, Prince Li, this jade pendant is Consort Wan's relic. You risked your life to retrieve it, which is a sign of filial piety and worthy of praise. But you still haven't explained clearly how you got to the 6th floor. Suddenly, a sneer came from the side. The Empress turned around and realized that it was Yi Jiding. He waved the fan in his hands and slowly said, Princess Consort Wan, don't you think so? Don't you know that the jade pendant is a yuan instrument? The Empress was dazed. What? That item is on the 6th floor. Rongxiu has Consort Wan's bloodline, so he can naturally go up successfully. Yi Jiding was originally filled with doubts. However, when he saw the jade pendant, he immediately understood everything. Now that he saw the Empress's overbearing manner, he couldn't help but feel annoyed. He lazily said, It seems like the Empress doesn't know about this. That's right. This is between His Majesty and Consort Wan. It's normal for the Empress not to know. The Empress was so angry that her face turned pale, but she didn't dare to talk back to Yi Jiding in public. Even though she was the Empress, even Emperor Jiawen had to give Yi Jiding some face, let alone her. There were so many pairs of eyes looking at her, which made her even more embarrassed. It seems like I can't do anything to Rongxiu and Chu Luyue today. I have to find another time. Thinking of this, The Empress forced a smile. Thank you for clearing my doubts, Elder Yi. His Majesty has already left, so I won't stay any longer. Then, she hurriedly turned around and chased after Emperor Jiawen. Father, please wait. Rong Xiu suddenly spoke, and his voice was as cold as jade clashing against each other. Emperor Jiawen, who had already walked a distance away, turned around in confusion. What's wrong? Rong Xiu stepped forward. Your son has a request. He stood there tall and straight. His body was clearly stained with messy bloodstains, but his eyes were calm and noble, making one unconsciously respect him. Emperor Jiawen asked, What's wrong? What's the matter? Rong Xiu's thin lips curved up into a perfect smile. This time, I entered Juyo Tower to save Miss Chu. It's fake, but it's true that I adore Miss Chu. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. Then he saw the man, who was always elegant and graceful, stretch out his long arm, lift his robe and kneel down. I don't have any other wishes in this life. I only want to hold one person's hand and grow old with her, just like what Mother said. Father, please grant me this marriage. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from IUN. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.